Okay.
We don't have a quorum, but we can go ahead and get started with the study session.
Okay, that sounds great. Good evening. My name is Pat Collette, and I'm standing in for Nick for the chair and the co-chair. This is the September 7th meeting of the MMTC. I'll read this initial information here. This meeting will be held in a hybrid format, which means attendees can choose whether to attend in person or virtually by Zoom. Multimodal transportation commissioners will be virtual or in person. Some staff will be present in the room while others will participate virtually. Virtual participation will continue to be allowed for any participant, including staff, board, and commission members and the public. City Commission meeting room layout has been adapted to accommodate hybrid meetings. Audience chairs will be separated by 6 feet of distance, and the City Hall lobby will also be set up for a limited number of members of the public to view meetings in person. This is not true anymore. Those who want to provide public comment may continue to do so virtually or by attending the meeting in person. In-person participants may that doesn't apply either. Written public comment must be received by the Municipal Services and Operations Department by 12 p.m. on the day of the meeting. I'll leave out that last part in terms of contact. So we'll go ahead and get started. We have a study session planned to kick off on crossing improvements, and we'll receive a presentation from Trekk Design Group.
Yep, thanks, Dave Cronin, city engineer. So earlier this year, we provided a draft scope of work to proceed on looking at guidelines and policy regarding crossing improvements. And so Trekk Design Group is here tonight to give a presentation on the progress that they've made so far. And so we've got Tom Nugent here in person and Stephen Edwards online. And with that, I'll just turn it over to them to take it away. Yep, you can get it there.
Hello, I'm Tawn Nugent, and I just want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to be here tonight. We're going to give you a presentation, and when I say we, I mean Stephen, and I'm here to answer questions in person and holler at me if we need to slow Stephen down. I do want to introduce him quick because he is definitely the expert, not just at Trekk, but across the country on topics of this. So he came from the city of Memphis. He's a transportation administrator there, so he understands Dave's role and the challenges we're facing here. He's also a NACTO representative that has traveled across the country looking at these types of problems and finding solutions, and given quite a bit of presentations across the country. So with that, I'll let him wax on here about some of these things and share with you what we found so far. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, Stephen, are you on and unmuted? And you should be able to share your screen as well.
So, can you hear me now?
We can, thanks.
All right. And am I not sharing my screen? Because it states I am.
You are.
Yep.
All right. Can you guys can see the presentation?
Yes.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, David. I think I've skipped a slide here. All right. So thank you everybody for having us. Despite several years of these virtual presentations now, it seems like we still stumble every single time we do one. To start this process off, Trekk has reviewed the existing guidelines and the existing conditions for Lawrence, Kansas, and then we applied that to kind of figure out our starting points of what we needed to address and how we needed to adapt the system. With the existing conditions, the existing guidelines provided in the Lawrence Bikeway Design Guide provides a great foundation for direction on types of facilities and how to use them, but does not provide specific information regarding the application and design of these facilities. The City of Lawrence Complete Streets Policy and corresponding checklists provide additional guidance and a formal process to ensure all aspects of street design are appropriately considered. Both documents rely on the designer's subjective judgment on determining the appropriate tool for the project. And so if you see these items up on the screen, I'm sure all of you have seen these numerous times in your role. You have the tables and these guides that give you within these bounds, you can make these decisions and these selections. And that gives you the flexibility to adapt to a context, but it sometimes makes it hard to make a firm decision as to why you're going to use something in one place over why you would use it in another place. So using that as our first step, we then did a peer review looking at 3 cities, Fayetteville, Arkansas, Columbia, Missouri, and Boulder, Colorado. These cities were chosen because they are all college towns. They have a very similar population to Lawrence, and land-wise, their land area, the amount of square miles they take up is fairly comparable. These areas were also all rated by the People for Bike system and the walk score system. So you have some independent agencies that are doing ratings and addressing how each city is applying different methodology. These cities, Boulder, Colorado ranks very high in most of these facets. And so it was a great place to kind of adapt, look at, and understand how we can address and grow the facilities there in Lawrence. So looking at this, each one of these cities did provide specific guidance on how to design the infrastructure in the street. And they also provided very specific guidance on how to apply these tools and where to apply these tools. So the decision for when to apply proven countermeasures are supported by tools such as the chart that you see on your screen now. This level of specific guidance, when coupled with design standards, provides a city with a starting point for budgeting a project and the designers the needed tools to address the problems identified within the project limits. Additionally, these tools help to ensure consistent and effective implementation efforts. So this specific guidance is what you need for consistency in your system, and consistency is very important for the safety of the overall system. This also has certain cost benefits overall to the city, because if you have very specific guidelines, then the review process for the city becomes a little bit less onerous, and things can move a little quicker. The projects can accelerate in their delivery because they have a very set guideline on how they're going to move through the process. In this presentation, this is really a kind of an introduction to the project and an overall view from a high level. So we looked at several different areas, and we have some general recommendations on that we think Lawrence should look at to apply moving forward. For pedestrian crosswalks, you have looking at using continental high visibility crosswalks. That's the markings here in the center. Those are typically 6 to 10 feet markings, and usually it's recommended you use those at arterial and collector road crossings. And so the width of those crosswalks is typically dependent upon the volume of pedestrians crossing the space. So if you have a lot more people crossing, you want them to be able to fit within the boundaries of that crosswalk. So you make it a little bit wider. Another aspect that you look at for the width of a crosswalk is the visibility down the road. So on hillier roads, or if you have corners and you lose the visibility of that crosswalk, you make it a little bit wider so you can see it from further away. The standard transverse markings, which are up top, which is the typical crosswalk for most cities across the nation, Using those on lower volume intersections or using them along minor road crossings along the arterial. So if you're going down the arterial and you have those local roads that are intersecting and you have a high volume of pedestrians in those areas, using the transverse markings on those crossings makes sense. It's not a signalized intersection. On a neighborhood street within an actual residential neighborhood, typically you're not going to apply crosswalk markings. The cost and the time to apply crosswalk markings and to keep them up in a neighborhood, the volume and the speed in those streets should be so low that it's not as needed for the visibility of the pedestrians and the movement and how everything is functioning within that environment. And the last item on this slide is the idea of using leading pedestrian intervals, which is a signal timing method to allow the pedestrian to enter the crosswalk. You provide several seconds of time for the pedestrian to be in the crosswalk, typically 4 to 6 seconds, depending on the width of the street, for the pedestrian to officially establish themselves in the crossing before you allow any type of adverse movement. That leading pedestrian interval can be extended to longer periods of time if you have a lot of turning vehicles. So if you have a lot of left turning vehicles, or if you're prohibiting right-hand turns and you have a lot of right turns across that and you're trying to make sure that you don't have those conflicting movements during that time. Shared use path crossings are they change based off of where they are placed. So on the screen you see I have a 12-foot continental high visibility crosswalk crossing. The federal guidance for shared use paths is for them to be 12 feet wide. Most cities have stayed at 10 feet. They started off at 8 feet, they grew to 10 feet, and then one of the more recent federal guidance came out for the 12-foot. Most cities have stayed at a 10-foot width, but when you get into the street area, changing that crosswalk to 12 feet, because you do not want the opposing movements to impact each other too much in that crossing pattern. So that extra move space gives you, especially for bicycles traveling in opposite directions, it gives you enough room for them to kind of adjust to each other, not slow down too long. That keeps the entire signal efficiency up and also makes it safer crossing. Your signage changes based off of the context of the crossing. If you're at a signalized intersection, your signage is going to be different than a mid-block crossing. And your markings, your stop bars, if you see in this picture, you see the stop bars are a little bit further away from the crosswalk. At mid-block crossings, if you have multi-lanes, you're going to move the stop bars back 20 feet to 50 feet away from the crosswalk to allow visibility past the other vehicles. So this vehicle here, if it was stopped and this other vehicle was traveling towards the intersection and this person's crossing, this person would not have visibility of the person entering this crosswalk if you had your stop bar in the standard 4-foot spacing away from the actual crossing. So that extra space gives additional visibility to the other lanes of traffic. At an intersection, if you have a shared use path crossing directly at an intersection, a good guideline is to always have a separated phase of the signal for that crossing. So as people approach from both directions, they will have their own phase of the signal to cross that intersection. The intersections may have to be modified based off of volume of turns, the overall volume of the system, and how everything works together. Typically, if you give a shared separate phase for that, the overall signal system often works better because that time that the pedestrian is usually added into your green light for the road traffic, that goes down, and so the overall signal functions at a faster cycle time, and it just functions a little bit nicer. So as we continue working through this process, we are going to develop a more specific guidance on how to address these in these different contexts. Overall bicycle facility standards. So how do you stripe these facilities? This is straight from the NACDO bike design guideline. This manual is a I guess a national best practice. A lot of this was rolled into a lot of the FHWA and ADJOURNMENT guidance that has come out regarding bicycle design. The determination how much your buffer space you use is something that having specific guidelines for this is something that will help with that design review process and how you're applying something standard throughout the city. So in one case, you're using something that's less than a 3-foot spacing, and you do not have to put these hatch marks or chevrons in those spaces, because less than 3 feet does not require that for visibility purposes. Once you start expanding that, then they want to make sure that people understand that that's not something that you're supposed to enter into. Less than 3 feet or a 2-foot marking spacing allows you to just do white lines, which allows you to run your paint trucks up and down the street. The application is way faster. But your cost for that actual implementation goes down also. So you're able to get a facility in place quicker, and you're also able to adjust that funding. So if you want to spend that money on armadillos, which are a small device that it's kind of like a small rubberized device that can go between the markings. It gives you a vertical delineation and also provides you some type of hard barrier that if they're put in correctly, if a car strikes them, it actually pushes the car back into the travel lane. There's a number of different devices that you can use to provide that additional delineation, and that money can come from just removing those chevrons. It's not a dollar-to-dollar basis, but it makes it a more economical choice to go with that. So as we're developing these, we'll also look at bicycle facility standards, making sure that we have specific guidelines on how the bicycle facilities, cycle tracks, any of these methods and these paint types are used and applied in the street. One of everybody's favorites are green bicycle crossings. So we adopted them here back in 2014. We started applying green markings throughout our major intersections. We've had a number of, there were some times where people didn't think there was enough bicyclists on the road, and they didn't understand why you're building bicycle facilities everywhere, or like why the extra cost for these things. And I think one of my favorite calls was a lady who was really happy that we identified the crosswalk on her street with the extra green markings to make it very visible as she crossed the street before they even got to the crosswalk. She thought it was kind of a buffer to give additional attention to the pedestrian environment. And so the bicycle facilities and these markings also provide a pedestrian benefit by, making everybody more aware of the environment that they're crossing. Our general recommendation for these green markings, for them to make sense and for them to be a cost-effective, safe solution for you, is you don't want green markings everywhere. If you place them everywhere, then they become secondary nature. Everybody's so used to them that they no longer have their impact for that natural reaction to the visibility of them. They become, everyday things. And so you want to place them on locations that have high volumes, have high conflict. So any of your arterial intersections, so longer arterials, all your arterials that meet other major streets or major collectors, you would want to have green markings for those crossings. If you have a bicycle facility on a local road that's crossing one of these high volume roads, then you would want that to be green. That way it brings out brings the attention of the driver to that, and also makes the bicyclist aware that they're going to be crossing an area that's going to have higher car volumes. Moving, the application that we're recommending is a continental style marking. So you would have a 2-foot stripe similar to a continental crosswalk, but in between you would have a 6-foot gap. And this type of application, because the bicycles are traveling at a faster speed, you don't need all the markings to be as close together. And the research has shown that these are just as visible as full green markings, but they last so much longer. And the cost of these is about 63% less than the traditional marking methodology. So if you place these out there, you can do these more economically. One of your other benefits to this is that it doesn't look exactly like a continental crosswalk along the same road. So if you have people that are colorblind or have any type of color sensitivity, they will not confuse those two crossings, which has obviously come up a number of times based off of some FHWA safety training I've been through. FHWA has now come in recommending this variation in style. When you go to lower volume crossings, so collectors meeting other collectors, or high volume driveways along arterials. So if you have an arterial that has a entrance to a shopping mall, if those things still exist today, or high volume gas stations, using chevrons to mark those. It's a cheaper alternative to the green, and it's a lower incident area. So you're still bringing awareness to them, but you're not drawing away from the impact of that overall green paint. Another item that David brought up during our conversations was prohibiting right turns on red. So a number of cities across the nation have been looking at changing this method. As you can see on the slide, this was really started back in the 70s as a fuel saving methodology for during the oil embargo days. And so the ability to, this was really just to increase the volume of cars that are going through. A lot of our streets now have been designed to where they only function well if you have that right turn on red capability. And so there's some different changes that you have to do with the signal timing and even the space that holds the vehicles on the street. So there's a number of cities that have prohibited right turns on red across the nation, but it's exceptionally few. New York City is one of the only places that it has been in law and has been that way for a number of years. Most states require you to have special signage and special, even possibly special lighting if you're choosing to do a right turn on red. So you have to have a red arrow signal up, like on a shared use path, if you're not allowing people to turn right across that shared use path a lot of times. So where you're going to look at prohibiting right turns on red are areas with high pedestrian volumes, any type of crossing with more vulnerable users like children, older pedestrians, or persons with disabilities, intersections adjacent to shared use paths or with an exclusive pedestrian phase. So during that leading pedestrian interval, you would have a no turn on red. You would need a sign stating that and possibly a signal indicating that. Or any place where a sight distance may be an issue for vehicles approaching from the left of that crossing. So the benefits are stated here on the slide. So there's a improved safety benefit for bicycles and pedestrians, where they show that the right turn on red actually increases the pedestrian and bicycle crashes by 44 to 59%, respectively. Now, your challenges, as I was stating towards the beginning of this, is that space that you have for the cars to be parked there waiting for the signal to progress. And so if you have vehicles sitting in space for too long, a lot of times those people will start running lights. And so you have to address your phasing and your timing to make sure that everybody at the signal is going to be behaving in a reasonable and rational manner. You also have additional vehicle conflicts with pedestrian crossings during green without exclusive pedestrian phases. And you have additional signage and signal devices. So A lot of these changes happen on your roads based off of what's called a road diet or a lane reduction process. You're doing something where you're changing the actual street itself. This is from TDOT. TDOT has an overall guideline. The Tennessee Department of Transportation has an overall guideline on how to reduce a 4-lane to a 3-lane street. This was actually borrowed from the city of Seattle, and this same flow process is actually now used. I think what we've found was 28 cities and 13 states are using this for the road diet process. So engineers and planners, we all like to borrow from each other quite a bit. So this is something that we would recommend to Lawrence in adapting, understanding the impacts of their city to the city infrastructure on how you're changing from a 4-lane cross-section to a 3-lane. You would do something similar for a 6-lane to a 5-lane cross-section. So that's changing from 4 travel lanes, 2 in each direction, to 1 travel lane in each direction and a 2-way left turn lane in the center. Or with the 6-lane, you'd have 3 travel lanes in each direction to 2 travel lanes in each direction with 1 left turn lane in the center. That has been shown to be a far safer and actually a far more efficient way of vehicles to travel because you reduce weaving movements and conflict points throughout the process. So we do recommend adopting a specific road diet process to move forward and understanding the impacts of that. And there could be additional information to provide for public meetings about the actual impacts and the benefits of doing these type of conversions throughout the city. And another item to think on is interim design strategies. So as you're resurfacing roads, that's your fastest and easiest way to start retrofitting your streets in your city. As you're retrofitting, you're changing to bike facilities, you're modifying these streets. So both of these streets were 4-lane roads that have been modified to 2 lanes with bike facilities and parking. This was an old industrial area and actually was where all the car lots were years ago. This is right by Sun Studios in Memphis. And this was just a resurfacing project that was worked on with a private foundation that provided all the private money to do everywhere you see red, all the planters and everything. And this was designed and placed. The city did all the white and the yellow striping, which would be what we would have typically done at that time. And the private group hired a contractor that went through the land development process to do the rest of these installations. What this allows is you to retrofit a street. This was designed and implemented in less than 4 months. Went through a public process, everything went in place. This was all built. The additional cost to the standard resurfacing budget was $293,000 for all the other materials. This is about 4.5 miles of roadway total that they were able to do this on. And if we were to build this and you're moving all the curb and gutter, the cost would have been in the millions upon millions of dollars to do this same type of design. This area at that time had no development. It was pretty much all empty. And now I didn't include a new picture in here. We won all kinds of awards from Congress of New Urbanism for this project, but that's where I got the picture from. But this area now has been completely redeveloped. There's not an empty building on site. Every hole has been filled in. It's full of people all the time. And so this is one way where as you're changing the context of the streets and you're developing something that's safer for pedestrians and everybody, that you can do these interim design techniques, do them quickly. This is using a material that's used in Chicago and New York City, a number of places, and a lot of these installations have been in for over 10 years now, and the maintenance has been exceptionally minimal. And so while we say that these are interim and these are temporary, these things actually last a long time. And in New York City, they do this. They actually have no intention of ever replacing these because their snow plows wouldn't be able to go up and down the street if you move the curb. So they built these to where the snow plows can operate, and then they just go out there, they move all the planters, and they put the planters back once the plowing's all done. So there's different applications that you can do, and it makes it easier to run through. So the next steps that we have on our project is to review and incorporate any comments from this group and other groups that are provided by Lawrence. We're going to develop the bicycle and pedestrian facility design standards and finalize policy recommendations. And then we'll be back in about a month to present again our final recommendations and standards for your review and comment, and proceed from there. Do we have any questions?
Any questions from commissioners? I have a couple. The first one, in looking at the charts that were listed at the beginning of the presentation, I was wondering if it's possible to have some a few examples, like 3 or 4 or 5 of intersections in Lawrence that would have the traffic counts and the pedestrian counts, so that we could have an idea of where those would fit in those criteria for those different applications.
Okay, so just doing a couple of demonstration locations where we could run through, we can provide recommendations and then develop a couple of conceptual demonstrations that you can see how they would be applied. And
correct, yeah, because it's difficult to, to look at the graphs and know, what those thresholds are, and if we're anywhere near those in certain intersections, and for the different kinds of treatments, what that recommendation would look like.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We've looked at this before and used this as a guideline on other things that we've done. I think when we looked at the crossing at 7th in Tennessee, we kind of looked at, does this fit the criteria for an RFB? Mm-hmm. So that's an example, but I think we could do that. Looking at the crossing guidance with different examples, and maybe provide that at the next meeting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great, thank you. The other question I had, I'm intrigued with the right turn on red information, and just wondered if there are any data that in terms of compliant, vehicle compliance with the right turn on red. Do we know anything about that? In cities where it's been implemented.
So in New York City, it's I think they say there's about a 92% compliance. So you have about 8% of drivers, and there with as many drivers, that's quite a few people that are not obeying. Mm-hmm. But they also have exceptionally stringent penalties for, like, if you don't do that. Mm-hmm. And they also have officers that's all they do is they sit out there and they're dealing with like certain parking issues and turning violations and like how taxi cabs are operating. So they have an enforcement division that's specifically geared towards dealing with some of those things. And when they set that up and they started these new processes, when they did speed cameras and a number of other things, they have like a 3 to 4 month period where they are just, they're on top of everything for that time period to make sure that everybody understands this is what they should be doing. Mm-hmm. So it's a difficult thing because you can't design it to function right. You're hoping that people are following what they should be following. And then it gets into the trick of enforcement. It's not something you can design engineering wise to force people to do it. It then travels into an enforcement issue.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Commissioner Bryan online. Charlie, would you like to go ahead? You're muted, I think, maybe.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Charlie Bryan, MMTC. My question is, I really appreciate having the chart that kind of explains the right, kind of how to use the right facility type for pedestrian crossings, but I was expecting something similar maybe for the bicycle facility types. And I wasn't sure, did I miss that, or is that going to be in the final product?
That things of that nature will be in the final product. This was more of an introduction to the program and to make sure that we understood what everybody from Lawrence really wants to see out of this. I didn't want to come in and start giving you a whole bunch of, you should do this, this, and this, and it not be the community really telling us what you want there. We got to make it fit towards your community and what you see and what you need. Okay,
I appreciate that. I think if there was guidance on that was similar for the bicycle facility types, that could be useful. Specifically, one situation we've kind of recognized we're in is that we have made the decision to move away from on-street bike lanes on higher speed limit roads, with the idea that it's safer to direct people to use shared use paths. So we've done that, and then more recently recognized that the national recognition program for bike-friendly cities essentially penalizes us for not continuing to invest in on-street bike lanes, because there's a ratio that they track, and we're far from hitting the level that it would take to get to the next. I think we're at bronze, and to get to silver, we'd have to do a lot more on-street bike lanes. So there's been this debate in the community about the appropriateness of what's been called the white stripe, bike lane. And I think if there's any guidance that you can provide on that, it would be certainly helpful in helping us kind of decide what's the right way to go forward with a facility type that is probably really useful for people that are comfortable on the road, but maybe doesn't encourage a lot of more cautious cyclists. And we're kind of just choosing between those two instead of providing both options. So maybe if there's some input you can provide on that, it would be helpful. And then, go ahead if you want to respond to that.
Yeah, I was just real briefly. So the Bicycle Friendly Communities is a great group. People for Bikes that runs that. My previous bicycle pedestrian coordinator is actually over their local programs process. So that rating system works well in some cases, but it doesn't work well everywhere. So there are great things that you can pull from them, and I have had the opportunity to actually go on study tours with them over to the Netherlands and to Norway. We went through Copenhagen, looking at how different things are designed. But that design type doesn't necessarily always fit somewhere, and it may fit in certain cities, but in your city, it may be better to have something that doesn't necessarily fit their model, and their model, it just doesn't apply everywhere. So it's great to sometimes be able to say like, oh, well, we've hit Silver City or, Gold City. I think there's only a couple of Platinum cities at this point.
Right.
But ultimately, your goal is to have great facilities for everybody, all age users to function, and for the bicycle and pedestrian system to function the same way the car system does for everybody. You want everybody to be able to make whatever choice they want to move however they choose to move in the city and provide the resources in that way. So we can look at it, and I can look at what your score is and what your, where you may be, where they say you're lacking, and I can give them a call since I know most of them, and just see what their guidance is and where they've been pointing Lawrence to go, and just give you a very clean and clear idea as to whether that's something that they do, that they believe because it's their national model, and if that really applies for you guys.
Okay. I'd appreciate that. I feel like what we've kind of been facing is a choice between two different types of cyclists. And, we hear it. We hear the community tell us, these aren't safe. We don't want to use them. But we also hear people saying putting a bike, a really, skilled cyclist on a shared use path is not their preference. So it feels like the only way to accommodate all users, as you suggest, would then be to provide both facility types, which becomes an issue of cost.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's those high level riders, which I think I'm kind of in that group. I'll ride on a high volume street without bicycle facilities at all. I ride in the right hand lane, and I understand how to interact around cars without getting scared and how everybody's going to react to me. And then, your city itself over time also grows that awareness of how everybody should act around each other. And if maybe, some point in time you can get it into your driver's education program on how drivers react to bicycles, that's always a wonderful day that everybody alike kind of comes on with everyone. But like the bicycle facilities on street, just the white lines don't apply for like a major road. If you have a street that's got a high volume and is over 40 miles per hour, putting a white line out there is just simply to say that you have a bike facility to check a box. It doesn't really provide any type of true protection or true system for the person that's in it. And so that person, like whether they're, in the lane with the car, or if they're riding, what would end up being like 1.5 feet away from a car, it's not that big of an impact other than, just saying, like, if you have the extra space and you want to do that, then that's fine. It works more as a wayfinding system at that time than it does as a protected facility or a facility that's really going to encourage bicycle riding.
Well, I appreciate your comments on that. We've also had some discussion with people that have come to us about the appropriateness of sharrows versus lanes. So any guidance you could provide on that could be really helpful to us. I had another question. I wanted to just ask more specifically about the Lawrence Loop, which is a trail that essentially goes about 20 miles around the primarily kind of the perimeter of the city. And it has several crossings, and there's a lot of concern about the perception of safety and actual safety of those crossings. And one suggestion we've heard from people in the community is that we should use the green paint to make those more visible crossings. And, what I'm hearing you say, and I've heard staff say, that the green paint needs to be reserved for facility types that are exclusive to bicycles. And those trails are shared use paths primarily. So do you have recommendations on trail crossings specifically?
Yes, and we'll give very specific guidelines for like the shared use path crossings, because that gets very detailed, whether they're mid-block or at an intersection, and the various contexts that you're dealing with that. But typically the white markings, like white or green markings, neither of those is more visible than the other. Your width of the space, like making sure that it's wide enough for that crossing and for the interaction and the volume of crossing, that matters. The placement of the stop bars, the placement of signage before that. You can get into the case where maybe you have RRFBs, so the rapid rectangular flashing beacons up at those crossings based off the volumes, or changing to a pedestrian hybrid beacon or a hawk signal at those crossings. There's many different steps to get that to where it's a more accurate representation. But a white marking versus a green marking at a mid-block crossing, it's not going to have any different impact, truthfully, as to how someone's going to react to that.
Well, similar to the request made earlier about providing examples from our community, it would be interesting, I think, to see maybe just a handful of crossings of the Lawrence Loop, and what might be the most appropriate crossing safety improvements. Something like that could be really helpful to us. Last thing I wanted to ask about is there's also been, I think, concern around crossings at roundabouts, and it would be really helpful to see some guidance specifically around the, best way for people that are either riding their bikes or walking to get through those sorts of intersections. And we have, quite a few roundabouts. They've been built at different times, over several years. So it seems like the way that we've had people walking and biking navigate across those intersections has changed a little bit. So maybe knowing what's the right practice, the best practice given most current guidance. And then, for example, do we need to go out and consider making changes at some of those crossings? Wakarusa in particular has a 4-lane, road with roundabouts. So that's a little bit more unique on that street. But most of the roundabouts are just your standard 2-lane roads. But something like that would be really helpful to have in the guidance around crossings.
And we could definitely provide some information on that. Trekk is, we design a lot of roundabouts and do a lot of work in that area. The variations in roundabout design have greatly changed over the last decade. You've had a lot of cities start building them more, and then you had the bicycle facilities really kind of growing at the same time. So the national guidance has changed dramatically over that decade period. So there's some guidance that we can definitely provide on that and help you out with that conversation.
I know I said that was the last thing, but I just had one more. Part of the Lawrence Loop crosses railroad tracks, and I don't know if you're going to cover that at all, but it might be interesting to have that as well, like just to help us understand like all the different ways that people are going to use that loop trail. How do we make sure that it's designed safely? And that's it.
All right. Well, it's a big topic, so there's always a lot of things that pop up with this. But the railroad, we can definitely provide some guidance on that, and there will also be some, I guess, pointers about who is responsible for what. Because when you're dealing with a railroad, the rail company itself has to do certain types of improvements on certain boundaries to that, and then the city comes in at a certain point, and it gets tricky. But there is definitely some guidelines and some ways of how to handle that process.
That it, Charlie?
Yes, that's it. I was going to mention school crossings, but I'll leave that to you guys.
Okay. Okay. Other questions from other commissioners? There are a couple of things in addition that I had. One has to do with will there be any guidance on advanced signing in terms of marking crosswalks or shared use paths at intersections, those kinds of things? Will that be included in those recommendations, or is it strictly the design of the facility?
No, ma'am. I would say, I mean, that to me, that is part of the design of the facility. I'm very big into holistic design. You can't just choose to look at the markings without looking at the signage or the signals or how the paths and everything else all intersect. You have to understand even the land use around that and how that's applying to the system at that location. So our recommendations will touch on all aspects of how you would address that spot based off of everything around it and everything that would tie into it.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Your materials, and Charlie alluded to it a little bit, in terms of the Lawrence Loop and other shared use paths that we don't have a huge number of mid-block crossings, but we do have a lot of at intersection crossings. And, you know, that I see that conflict in some of those high volume intersections. And that's why I asked the question about right turn on red, because that's, you know, that seems to be one of the major conflicts, or cars turning right as, you know, people are in the intersection. And sometimes they pay attention and sometimes they don't. So just, you know, in terms of what that design could look like would be really helpful. And then the second thing I had was just, you mentioned at the end of your presentation about next steps and the public input. And I wondered what the plan was, since we'll see the final plan in a month. I'm wondering what the plan for public input will be on that.
Yeah, well, I think the input we would want to get would be at this meeting. We don't have any current plans on the scope to go out and do just dedicated and public input on the design details. But I think really wanted to have a professional that is involved in this work provide, you know, a lot of, you know, typical policy and design criteria that they see in other cities that we would the next step. So I think it's at this point, that's kind of the way that we see it proceeding.
So just encouraging people to make comment so when we get the final report next month, and we can review it and provide additional input at that point, and from the public or from commissioners.
Absolutely.
Okay, that sounds great. Okay, is there anyone online that from the public that would like to make comment? I don't see anyone on my screen. Christina, is there anyone there? Michael Allman? Hey, Michael, would you like to make a comment?
Yes, I would. Thank you. Very good presentation, and I support pretty much everything Commissioner Bryan said and requested that be included in this study. So please note all of his comments when you go further. I'm with a group called Sustainability Action Network. For 15 years, we've been advocating for safer bikeways in Lawrence. And our approach is not for what you call performance bicyclists, people that get out there to push their limits, to get exercise, to challenge themselves, whatever. We're interested in bicycle transportation for everyday use and for all ages and abilities. Part of that is just to reduce the number of vehicle trips by motor vehicle for a climate perspective. So all ages and abilities for us, I was interested that Mr. Edwards said that he wants to see what the people of Lawrence want. Thank you very much. That's perfect, because we have oftentimes a different perspective on priorities and designs for bikeways than does the city engineer. For example, you said everybody's favorite are green pavement markings. Well, that's not necessarily true of the city engineer, although he acknowledges that they have their place. It's just a question of, we feel they have more of a place than what he does at this point. And so that's one reason we have you hired as a consultant. So I was interested when you said that in your community that there's extra benefit of green pavement for crosswalks. And you did say crosswalks. And you said they provide pedestrian benefits too. That to me implies that there are some situations where a crosswalk will benefit more, and particularly like in the high conflict areas, which you mentioned, and I totally agree. Green pavement marking could be appropriate. And my organization proposed putting green pavement at high conflict intersections at, I think it was about 150 locations in Lawrence. The city engineer yanked that funding, and wanted to do more studies, which, okay, I can live with that if this study comes up with some good solutions. But there is a difference of opinion here. And one thing I was wanting to address in intersections, you know, aside from green pavements or continental crossings or right turn on red, whatever, those are attempts to do a fix on an intersection, most of which have been designed forever for the benefit of motor vehicle geometrics and movement. And getting pedestrians and bicyclists through there safely has always been a challenge. Rather than just looking at an after fix, are you going to be able to provide us any information on redesigning the intersection? Like, for instance, protected intersections, which the geometrics make the turning motions of the vehicles, which you know are the most dangerous and cause the most injuries and deaths, make those turning movements slower and more methodical, and to swing around the corner in a way that they have a 90-degree approach to a pedestrian crossing or a bikeway crossing.
Michael, we've reached 3 minutes.
Oh, okay.
But I appreciate your comment.
I'd like to see some intersection design changes in this whole study too. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we've reached 6 o'clock. Are there any other questions or comments that anyone would like to make?
We have till 6:15.
Oh, we do. Okay. 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 Yeah. So we do have additional time. So if there are any other comments.
Well, this is Charlie again. I can always think of something else. I did kind of briefly throw in school crossings. The other thing that might be at least trying to be comprehensive about this, our transit users, you know, they're pedestrians most of the time. Some ride their bikes and then they put the bikes on the front of the buses. But I just wonder if there's any unique perspective that we need to consider around the safety of transit users that are getting, you know, to our bus stops, which are, you know, sometimes you have to cross the street to get to the bus going one way or another, right? It's because that's just part of the design of the transit routes. So I'm not sure that provides a perspective of its own, or if it just needs to be thought about. But when I think about the types of users that are out there that all kind of have to manage getting across the roadways that we have, they're one of those groups that should be thought of as well. That's all. Thank
you. Mr. Thornburg, were you interested in making a comment? Oh, I thought you were waving. No? Okay.
That's all.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Thornburg, were you interested in making a comment?
There are some of us in the community that
waving.
Can you hear me?
No. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I think he has a delay.
Mr. Thornburg, were you interested in making a comment?
There are some of us in the community that
waving.
Can you hear me?
No. Okay.
Can you? My question is, some of us in the community believe that the Idaho stop would be a valuable safety feature. I'm a very experienced cyclist. I've been hit, and I know of another very experienced cyclist who was hit and wouldn't have been if the Idaho stop were available. Now, I know that we would have to be the first in Kansas to do this. So I don't want this to be overlooked because of that. Colorado, for example, after several cities adopted it statewide, I'm open to your thoughts on it, but I would like it addressed. Thank you.
Thank you.
We can definitely provide additional information on that, and some of the other items that have come up. We can look at that. The Idaho stop is actually the methodology in Tennessee. But it creates a lot of it has dual sides to it. So there's a lot of issues where people have problems with that because the motorists think that the bicyclist is going to stop, and a motorist then reacts in a different way. Or you have people that just believe that everybody should behave the same way independent of the vehicle that they have, and they act out in a ridiculous manner. So it does have some different nuances to it, but we can pull up some information and get you some background about how that's functioning in different places, who uses it, and give you some guidance on where you might want to look for that.
Great, thank you. Stephen, you mentioned earlier in your presentation armadillos. I'm not familiar with that treatment. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yes, ma'am. That's the benefit of having an overview presentation. You don't have a whole lot of details in there, just me running my mouth. But
I was just curious here.
Yeah, armadillos are probably about, I guess, about 2.5 inches tall, and they're about 4 or 5 inches long. They make these little dome shapes, and you put them in succession down the street. And it allows the stormwater to still travel between them. But if you angle them at the right place, they have high visibility markings on them. And if a car hits them, it's not going to stop a car from going over the top of them. But if a car just barely nips them with an angle, it's going to push the car back into the travel lane as opposed to the car sideswiping bicycles.
Yeah, okay.
They're easy. They're fairly cheap. They've become exceptionally popular, so the cost has gone down a lot. For a long time, you could only buy them from an Italian manufacturer. So now there's 2 manufacturing plants here in America. But they're easy to maintain. They're easy to put down. In your area with the snow plows and things of that nature, you would have the additional maintenance burden of actually having to remove them and snow plowing. So when you get to the snow season, they would have to come up. That allow the plows to move, and then you would put them back down after the snows are over.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, it looks like we've reached the end of comments here, so we'll look forward to the final report at next month's meeting and have a chance to respond to that.
Thank you, everyone. Look forward to seeing you again next month.
All right.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you very much.
Great. Okay, we'll adjourn the study session and reconvene at 6:30, I guess. Right?
6:15.
6:15. Okay. All right. 6:15. 6:15, we'll call the meeting to order again. Again, this is the September 7th meeting of the MMTC. I'm Pat Collette, standing in for Nick and for Damon, who are absent this month. So I'd like to open it up with the item B, which is to approve the minutes. If everyone had a chance to take a look at those. Oops.
So Commissioner Collette, before we proceed with that, we're going to need to wait till Charlie gets here.
Oh,
He's not on Zoom anymore. And we're one short of a quorum.
okay.
So I believe he's
on his way.
on his way from
Yeah.
Zoom to in person.
Okay, that sounds great.
So maybe we'll take a few minutes and wait for him.
So moved.
Moved by Charlie Bryan. Is there a second?
A second.
Okay.
Laura.
Second by Laura Bennett. All in favor? In favor? Say aye.
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 Opposed? Didn't see any opposition. Okay, that sounds great. Yeah, there we go.
Is it possible to reorder the agenda items?
Yes, we were just, we'll do public comment first, and then we'll take
Thank you.
a motion to redo that. Okay, public comment. The public's allowed to speak to any items or issues that are not scheduled on the regular agenda. Public comment will not be received for staff items, commission items, or calendar. Each person or organization will be limited to 3 minutes. As a general practice, the commission will not discuss or debate these items, nor will the commission make decisions on items presented at this time. Individuals are asked to come to the microphone, sign in, and state their name and address. Speakers should address all comments to the commission. So with that being said, is there any public comment on anything not on the agenda? Doesn't look like in person. Is there anyone online?
Michael Ullman's got his hand raised.
Okay. Michael?
Hi, Michael Allman with Sustainability Action Network again. Several things. First of all, I hope that Mr. Cronin will give us a report on the attendance of one of the members of the board that was brought up last month. I'd like to know what the result of that is. Last night, the City Commission passed the Capital Improvement Plan. You probably know there's a number of interesting projects on there, one of which is $1,800,000 for Massachusetts multimodal from 14th to 23rd. And I would think that the Multimodal Transportation Commission could request Mr. Cronin to bring the design to you to see what they're going to do. From 11th to 14th, MSO used green pavement markings at all the intersections. And then at 21st Street, there's green pavement markings there also. So I think the whole design should be consistent. Onward, another project is geometric improvements at 23rd and Naismith. I'd like to share my screen if I could. There's a view of that red circle, 23rd and Naismith. It's a convergence. This is the Naismith Valley Trail. This shared use path is going to be built along Naismith up to 19th Street. But now let me stop sharing that and share that. There's the Naismith Valley Trail. It jumps across Naismith at this curve and then goes on the west side. The new shared use path is going to be on the east side of Naismith up to KU. A few years ago, when the proxy development was being built, Commissioner Stuart Bowley suggested that this trail, instead of going across the street, continue on the east side up to 23rd Street. When this intersection is reconfigured, that's the time to do that. That would then have the alignment continue consistently on the east side of Naismith. This is also a nexus of bikeways. The proxy developer dedicated room for a shared use path along here. And if you recall that previous slide, 23rd Street is designated in the bikes plan as a future bikeway. So there'll be a bikeway coming across here. This intersection needs to take into consideration more than motor vehicle geometrics. I don't know what the intention is, but I think the Multimodal Transportation Commission should inquire about that. We just talked about intersections. Let's design the intersections to do the safety that we want to see for pedestrians and bicyclists, instead of retrofitting them later with green pavement or no right turn on red or whatever. Let's do it right to start. So that's basically my comments, and I appreciate your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Any other comments online? Doesn't appear so. Okay, let's move on to the agenda items. There's been a request to move item 4 to the beginning of the agenda. So I'd like to entertain a motion for that to happen. So to move receiving update on the Old West Lawrence traffic calming project up to number 1. Is there a motion to approve that?
Yeah, I move to put the item number 4, receive update on the Old West Lawrence traffic calming project, to the top of the agenda items.
Okay.
So it would be number 1.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Laura? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, looks like we're good to go on that. So we'll move to receiving the update on the traffic calming project. There is a report attached to our agenda. And okay, Justin?
Wanted to share screen here so I can have the attachments up while I'm talking through them. Thanks. Okay. So this is our update on Old West Lawrence traffic calming project we've been working on. So we brought this to the June 6th Multimodal Transportation Commission meeting. And since that time, we've continued to meet with the neighborhood and develop plan to move forward. Notice we had several meetings, virtual, hybrid, and I was able to attend a neighborhood walkabout where we were able to evaluate how some devices would be, you know, on the ground, if you will. I guess coming out of the June 6th meeting, the neighborhood requested that we not do our Lawrence Listens survey on the, we'll call it the second iteration, which is out there now. And so we did not do our survey, but the neighborhood did do some engagement on the plan that they developed. And so they did an open house and a survey. And that's the first attachment is kind of the summary results of the survey that the neighborhood did on their plan. I guess I'll show their plan while we're talking about that. So their plan was the last attachment on this item. And the neighborhood provided their plan and those survey results to us here at our last meeting, I think last week. So at the same time, while the neighborhood was developing their plan, doing their engagement, we, the city and our consultant JEO were developing a revised plan, based on feedback we've heard throughout the process from the public as well as the neighborhood. And so our revised plan is informed by neighborhood preference for speed humps. They like them. They think they're effective. So we leaned in that direction. And then also a strong neighborhood opposition to anything that restricts turn movements at the intersection. So we would recommend removing the median barriers that are out there now that restrict turns at several intersections and then replacing some of those median barriers with small traffic circles. So a calming effect, but not restricting turn movements in line with the request from the neighborhood. So again, what's on the screen now is the city and JEO revised plan. Includes 8 speed humps or cushions and 3 small traffic circles. And then we scroll back to the neighborhood's plan that they've developed. Includes 12 speed humps or cushions, 6 circles, 5 we call those the half lane chokers that would be like a curb bump out to restrict the width of the roadway on certain entrances to the neighborhood. And then they would also have 2 of the digital speed feedback signs. I believe both of those on Main Street as you enter the neighborhood from 6th or 9th. And the neighborhood has requested to do a pilot of their full plan, similar to the 2 previous iterations we've done, where we would try to configure these traffic calming devices using our temporary materials we have, collect another round of data, potentially a scaled down data collection effort where we're focused on the higher volume streets of Michigan, Maine, and Mississippi. And I think, and then I guess moving forward, we have a meeting scheduled for next Thursday evening again with the neighborhood, city staff, and JEO to continue the discussion of our plans, and we'll have cost estimates for both plans at that point, and try and fit that into a schedule of being able to implement and complete this year. I think with that, I'd open it up to questions for myself or Dave.
Questions from the commissioners?
So-
Go ahead.
So at this point, you don't have a cost estimate for the neighborhood design?
Not fully vetted. We're in progress with that. Yep.
Do we have enough equipment to do the temporary installation?
That is a concern. We do not have enough temporary speed humps to do their full plan in a temporary configuration.
Is that something we could, I guess, help me understand like how practical it is to purchase that? Would it be useful, years from now as we work with other neighborhoods? Like, do we need to buy more stuff is, I guess, what I'm wondering.
Yeah, so we have 10 of the rubber speed humps already, and so we'd need to purchase 2 additional. And I talked to the vendor today, and those would be about $8,000 a piece, but they do have a 49-day lead time at this point. So that would present a challenge for the schedule.
Yeah, and I don't know if we would reuse them or not. We might be able to reuse them in another project, but we bought 10 a few years ago or 2 years ago, right? We've got them all out there, so if we had a need to use them, but I think that would be, and if we were to follow through with doing that full pilot, that would be a time thing for us to purchase them and then wait to have them if we were going to do another full study with everything on the plan. So,
Is it just those 2 items that would need to be, like, or is there more
I think we got everything.
equipment need that you don't have?
I guess the other challenge is both plans are recommending small, like 20-foot diameter traffic circles in the intersections. So that the 20-foot diameter would be the traversable apron that larger trucks and emergency vehicles could traverse that larger diameter, and then there would be a smaller, like 6 to 8 foot diameter circle that's a barrier that you could not run over, and those would fit in the footprint of the existing intersections. But we have not determined a way to configure those in a temporary manner. The traversal apron being the challenge of just how we could get the right impact of having that 20-foot diameter for smaller vehicles to have to navigate, but then also be traversable mainly for emergency vehicles. That is another challenge with implementing either of the plans with a temporary configuration.
Yeah, getting accurate speed data would be difficult, but volume, we could get volume data. And I think, in our discussion, and I'm sure they'll have the neighborhood has some comments, but what we heard is they want, when we put in the current configuration, it's kind of diverted traffic to Mississippi and Maine and Michigan. And if we were to remove those, what we've heard, at our last meeting was the ability to go back and say, well, the volumes are kind of back on, spread across the streets as they were before we had those diverters. So I think, we've seen volume increases on those streets, Maine, Michigan, and Mississippi. And that was, part of the discussion on data collection that we talked about last week was, to be able to show that the volume has gone back down on the streets that have been diverted to under this last installation that's out there. And so the plan that we put together was just, we were trying to fit the remaining dollars in the budget, the $80,000 that we had left over. Those were rolled over from 2021. I think we had about 90, but assuming there was some for design, that's our plan. We kind of asked the neighborhood to see if there was anything that they would tweak on our plan, and they're really interested in, seeing what the cost and of the full plan that they put together. So that's kind of where we're at right now, and we could certainly. We'll intend to do that, and there can be different options, and then after that, it's a matter of the cost and how we pay for it. So.
So am I hearing correctly that we don't have a way to do temporary installation of a small traffic circle? Like, that doesn't exist in our bag of options.
Yeah, not to replicate a permanent one, but we've done them before. Before we built permanent traffic circles in University Place neighborhood, 17th and 18th in Indiana and Alabama, we used curb blocks, and they were temporary, and they were there for many years, but they just they're not as effective because they're small, and when you have the permanent traffic circle, it has the apron that slows down vehicles from going through quickly, but also allows trucks. And so if you were to make it large with a temporary device, you would restrict truck movements, and we've had some issues with the current configuration of the diverters with trucks and trailers over tracking the curb radii and the curb ramps, and so that's the design challenge.
So the small traffic circles that were in University Place would or would not work in this neighborhood?
Well, I don't know if I would say they wouldn't work. I mean, we want, ultimately we want to have a permanent installation, something that's going to be effective, right? And so, if we were to go out and put in small circles, that's something that could be done. But we wouldn't want to leave those permanent.
They were in University Place for a decade, or how long?
A long time. I don't know how long they were, but they were there for a long time until we had enough funds to. They were on the traffic calming list for many years.
I guess what I'm trying to get clear is, for the sake of a pilot, how far away are we from being able to pilot the neighborhood's proposal? Sounds like we're 2 speed humps short in terms of the equipment that you have. And then I'm not getting a clear answer on, could there be a temporary traffic circle just to get the data? Like, is that?
Yeah, there can be a temporary traffic circle, but it won't replicate
right
a permanent one. And so I don't know if you were to get speed data at a smaller traffic circle, that it would be that you could then say, well, it's going to slow down the speeds to this when it's not. So I think that's can we install it? Yes, I think we've got enough of the curbs to do it. And so, yeah, it's us getting with our field staff to see the ability to go out there and do the installation. There's a lot of labor that's involved in it. And so that's, as far as next steps and being able to complete it, it would, getting their help is needed, and being able to get out there, because they just haven't planned to do it yet. So.
How about the planters? The half-lane planter, they have 5 in this proposal. Is that something that would be easy to construct, to be able to see how that impacts traffic in there?
I believe so. I mean, it'd be similar to what we've done on 21st Street Bike Boulevard, where we've got little islands and constricted the lane, kind of where parking would be. And so that would be a matter of using the rubber curbs as well.
So I guess my thinking on this is we need to try to do, I mean, this is our pilot for this whole program, and it needs to be a, process where we're working with the neighborhood to figure out what's best to calm traffic neighborhood wide, not just on a single street. And before this, traffic calming was taken on a street by street basis, and sometimes had the spillover effect because it wasn't thought about, in a broader context. So I still feel like we need to stay the course of trying to think neighborhood level instead of street level. But it also seems like we're needing to be careful to set the expectations right with neighborhoods, that it is not a unlimited budget. And then there are rules that have to be followed for what sorts of traffic calming is even appropriate on any given street. But within that, I think it's okay to go past what the budget is and we create a list of unfunded elements of a plan, which is fairly common. The question of funding, I would hope, doesn't get in the way of getting clear on what would make sense for the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. There's lots of ways to think about funding. A lot of that's not in our place to decide. It's really city commission. But what we can help is facilitate, like, what's the right design for this neighborhood so that it meets their goals around traffic safety and whatnot. So I'd like to see us try to carry it out as best we can without the funding being a primary consideration at this point. I don't know. I mean, it sounds like the budget's getting smaller and smaller every time we talk, but can we get to the point where we have essentially a plan for the neighborhood that says, here's the traffic calming for this neighborhood, and then we can say, well, we only have this much today, so we can phase it in. Like, we have enough funds to do phase one, and the next phase is unfunded. And that's another problem the neighborhood will have to wrestle with. And if we get more funding from the city commission, we can consider whether that's the right next investment or if it needs to move on to another neighborhood, that sort of thing. But
yeah, we've talked about that a little, having a possibility for a phased approach. And so, yeah.
Those traffic calming projects were on that list for years.
Yeah, there was. And so, to be quite frank, and I think without having, this is the first time we've done this, we haven't created that flow chart or checklist of process, and we kind of, we used to have criteria, what would meet speed and volume to have traffic calming. We're not using that. And so there may be some of those things as we move forward to the next neighborhood, we're gonna, kind of get that, the program or the guidelines kind of, recorded, and so that we have some good guidance on process in the future. But yeah, at the end of the day, if we create the plan, and we can have different options and different funding levels, and we, if there's available funds that come available, or if the neighborhood really wants to go forward with it, there's the possibility to do a benefit district. So that there's all kinds of different options, right? We got the program funds, and then or it could be a separate request to the city commission for a project. So. Yeah, I think we're going to keep, our intention was to meet again next week and keep discussing. And really, I think kind of Dustin told you, we're looking at the costs for this full plan as they asked us to bring back to them, and what it would take for us to be able to do an implementation. So we're going to look at, we're still have our engineering consultant, JEO, engaged in this. They haven't made the last couple of meetings, but I think trying to get them there back included so that they're the ones that did the data collection after the first 2 rounds.
Also, I have a question or a comment, I guess. Since we don't know the cost implications, but just back on the question of the 10 temporary speed humps and whether, in looking at the 2 plans, I can't compare them side by side, but, you know, if there are 2 locations that are agreed on in the plan and it fit financially, whether 2 could just be constructed because it's, you know, that it's determined that that's probably a common location that will end up with 1, and then use, you know, for the remaining locations, use the temporary humps. Would that be a possibility, or, you know, something to throw into the mix, I guess?
Well, we don't intend to leave the temporary devices out there if we move forward. If we were to do a phased type approach, that's where we ended up landing. We wouldn't intend to keep the temporary devices out there,
Right.
because we would want to use them in another area, another neighborhood.
Right. But I just thought in terms of data collection on this pilot, you know, in this pilot phase, that, you know, that you would be able to have the 10 or the 12 locations, but 2 of them would end up being permanent, and then the others would be taken out based on the data, you know, what was effective.
Yeah, well, I think that would be difficult for us to go out and construct them, get a contractor just to do 2.
Yeah, okay.
And so we'd prefer just to do them all at once. But, you know, I think part of the discussions, you know, if there's ways that, you know, I think we know the speed humps slow traffic down to speeds that meet, that are at or below the speed limit. So we know that. So I don't know necessarily think we would have to put them all out there. But so that's just something that, you know, we need to talk about, and that's kind of the next step, I think.
Any other comments from the commissioners or questions? Well, I open it up to public comment. If anybody would like to speak, just come up to the podium.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, 3 minutes.
Okay, all right, great. My name's Charlie Sedlock, 630 Indiana. Thanks for all of your time and effort and focus on this. Thanks to the city for all of their effort. Dustin walking around with us on a hot night, Dave coming to our meetings. I'm going to speak to you on a few points and what I miss and can't cover in that 3 minutes. We have a whole team here, and they have been fantastic to work with. All of our spouses were probably about ready to kill us because our diligence and cadence probably matched that of an M&A group. We've been very busy. We meet many hours per week. We walk the neighborhood, we survey, and check this out. The reason is because, as you know, we did a pilot. It did not go as well as we planned. We saw the spillover that you were addressing, and we were not accepting of that. It pushed too much traffic to Maine and Michigan, and so as a group, we came back together and said, what can we do so that we can come up with something more holistic? And so we have worked hard. We have a near, NACDO guy on board now. We've got folks researching planters all the time. We have folks looking at progressive communities around the United States and in Europe so that we can help come up with something. We know that budget is important, but we think that we can creatively solve the problem of speeding and volume in our area. And other communities are doing this. And when you saw the Trekk Design earlier on what they were going to spend on the built environment versus painting in some cities, and $290K versus several million on a budget, that's the type of thinking we're looking for, and we need those kind of resources. So we are very well supported in the neighborhood. 75% of our respondents said they would like for us to proceed in a holistic manner for a combination of slow and traffic calm streets. what we would like to do is make our neighborhoods safe for pedestrians and cyclists and also for cars. We would like to continue to focus on the objectives of a 25% speed traffic volume reduction and a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, which we've had for years. There are some differences. You know, Dave has done a great job of presenting traditional traffic calming. We're pushing for something that's going to be more budget friendly and more holistic, and that's why we've looked to outside communities on planters, other things that still can do the same types of have the same effect, but be more budget friendly. I think we'll keep working together. We enjoy our meetings with the city, but we really need the support of MMTC, and I appreciate your comments tonight in that we want to further develop our plan and our proposal and our budget and collect data. It's very important to our neighborhood, and that is our ask of you tonight. We want to keep pushing forward. I'm probably well over time. If anybody else has things, they can jump in here. One last point. On guidelines and process going forward, we're very, we have a great team here. We're more than happy to offer our viewpoints and any advice to help get to best practices. We think process and how you proceed is very important. We've had consensus and unanimity amongst the entire group. It's hard to do. It takes a long time.
Thank you.
And we don't all agree. All right, thanks.
Thank you. Additional public comment?
Hi there, Kyle Johnson, 700 block of Maine. I think I'd just like to reiterate that we're very much in favor of finding a holistic approach. We agree the speed humps certainly slow down traffic. What we're trying to do together as a team is figure out what layout in concert can slow down and reduce traffic volumes together. So we're really focused on a holistic plan and certainly on collecting data and soliciting neighbor feedback. So we have a map. We're going to work with Dave and Dustin on budget and timing and things like that. But I just wanted to say I'm very appreciative of the comment or the notion of let's find a plan that the neighborhood can get behind and then figure out how to find the budget or figure out a phasing strategy or so on and so forth, because we don't want to just provide little half measures and then that doesn't work and people are frustrated. We're really trying to do our best here to make the next pilot a success. So, again, just to reiterate one other thing that Charlie said, we're also very interested in these innovative solutions that may not currently be in the playbook, but we're very interested in continuing to push on that. We've done some research to show that some of these devices have been used in other cities and have been studied extensively and are effective. And so we'll continue to talk about those things and try to find a way to move forward on those. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Eric Kirkendall, 714 Mississippi Street. Thank you for having us here tonight. Really appreciate it. What we've learned over the past year or so on this project is a safe streets approach would be really good for our neighborhood, and we think it could be adapted to many other neighborhoods too. Neighborhoods built on an old-fashioned grid pattern have very similar problems, and as you know, there's other neighborhoods like that. We want the city to help us reach our neighborhood objectives. We've done our best to do a design. I call it a conceptual design. We're not experts. We've done our best to learn all we could, but this is a new area for Lawrence. The city hasn't, as you said earlier, hasn't done this for a neighborhood before, and so we're kind of the learning platform, and we've gone off in wrong directions, and now the neighborhood's completely coalesced around this. So in the end, what I hope is that the city will accept our neighborhood objectives of keeping traffic to as close to the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit as possible, I think, which is only fair, that is the speed limit, and reducing traffic volume by 25%. I won't dwell on it, but you know, we get a lot of cut-through traffic from US Highway 40 going to campus, et cetera. So part of it is we're trying to keep that inappropriate traffic out of our neighborhood. In the end, in the final analysis, I think some of this tweaking of direction is more a policy issue than an engineering issue. And that's why we're in front of the MMTC, and why we're talking to city commissioners is we think the city needs to move a little bit to help us do this. And I very much appreciate everything y'all have done. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Haley Bruns. I live at 810 West 8th Street between Mississippi and Illinois. I have done a significant amount of the research on the planters, what's been done around the country primarily, to look at what we could do that would be less expensive and still create a aesthetically pleasing, slower speed in our neighborhood. One of the approaches that I liked primarily is in Portland. And my feeling is if a city as large as Portland can put a concrete structure and turn it upside down as a planner and use a couple of them in a large street, certainly we could do that. And what they did was amend some of their local city standards. And they were still able to keep their stop signs while doing these trials. But it created the actual structure in there. And I think that it's really critical for us to be able to look at what is already out there so that we're not recreating the wheel here, putting our barriers out there, leaving them for a decade. I think we all who've been here remember south of campus and those being there. So I think if we can look at that, Portland also tested 6 of their fire trucks on different different safety devices, and the speed difference it took. And their traffic engineer, their senior traffic engineer for Portland, rewrote what their code was going to be for the city of Portland, based on the second differential it was taking, and what the course would be then for their fire trucks. So I feel like it's out there. We just need to broaden our horizon a little. We need help from the MMTC to go, okay, we're going to look broader. We're not going to stay in Lawrence. We're going to let it branch out a little bit and encompass some of these things that might be out there as considerations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Katie Oliver, 824 Arkansas Street. I'm also on the Old West Lawrence Association Exec Board. I'm just going to piggyback off of what Haley already said. We're really here because we're looking to explore maybe non-traditional ways of calming traffic in our neighborhood. And we think that these smaller traffic circles that don't necessarily have this apron, with still keeping our stop signs at some intersections, would help us achieve our goals of reducing cut-through traffic as well as speed in our neighborhood without increased cost. We know that the traffic circles that were discussed in the plan with the city are quite expensive, going to require quite a bit of work with those intersections. And then there's also the concern about emergency vehicles navigating around those. So we think that our plans, if you compared them side by side, it's really the difference of those smaller circles that we know exist outside of Lawrence and are being used successfully in other communities, that we would like the chance or at least support to try. And I think that that's maybe where our key differences in what we would like to pilot lie. So thank you for your time, and we really appreciate all your comments about this program and our neighborhood being the first to pilot this and the opportunity to do it right. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, without seeing any, bring it back to the commission. Any? Oh, okay, yeah, Michael?
Hi, Michael Wallman. I really like to commend the people in Old West Lawrence for their proactive approach to this and being so creative, and Dustin Smith for shepherding the process. I would caution everybody, by the way, about the University Place, those small traffic circles they had for many years. The University Place did not like those small makeshift traffic circles. They did have stop signs with them, and the circles themselves weren't geometrically effective, and the stop signs were very confusing. The neighborhood did not like them, and they fought and fought until they got the real workable traffic circles over there. So just take that into consideration. You might talk to the people over there. Also, this approach for a whole system design for the scope of the project, that's excellent way to go about it. And I think the phased funding that you're thinking maybe doing, it really defeats the purpose of the whole neighborhood traffic hopping program, which instead of doing piecemeal street by street, which then shifts the traffic, if you don't install the whole system in the whole district all at one time, it's going to have that deflective effect of people just going a different route. I think you need to do it all at once. On the speed humps, I'm just curious, $8,000 for a temporary speed hump, how durable are those? I'd like an engineer to tell us, because maybe Lawrence could just use those rubber speed humps permanently everywhere. I mean, the constructed ones cost $8,000 3-4 years ago. So these might be a cheaper way to go. And I would like an explanation of these half-plane planters. Is that a pinch point that takes the street from 2 lanes down to 1 lane? So that like a 1-lane bridge, so everybody has to slow down. I'd like an explanation of what that half-lane planter does. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, anyone else online, Christina? Okay, and then bring it back to the commission. Any other comments or questions that you'd like to ask of Dustin? Or? I guess I'd like to clarify what the next steps are. You mentioned that you're going back to the neighborhood and with some cost estimates. What did you say is the approximate timeline for that? And will that then come back to MMTC? Is that next month or is it further down the line?
Probably not next month, but
okay.
We are intending to bring back November to MMTC so that we can get to City Commission before the end of the year for an approval for a permanent install.
That was our goal. So we've got, process to go through to be able to do that if we do data collection in a pilot. So
right.
That may be too optimistic at this point if we go that route. But yep, we're meeting next week to provide the costs that they asked us to provide and materials, and then we'll hopefully create a plan after that. One thing that we definitely need to do is inform the public on the status of the project, since we've we've kind of agreed that the diverters aren't going to be there permanently, but they're still out there, and we've intentionally left them until we've made a decision on
Alternative, yeah.
recommendation to move forward.
Okay.
We can provide an update at the next meeting for sure.
Okay, that would be great. Yeah, I'd be interested in those cost comparisons. And anyone else?
Well, so there's a resource online called tacticalurbanisimguide.com, and it provides, I think, kind of these ideas around a creative approach. And they have some estimates of what it would cost to buy these very temporary things, and they're suggesting it's like $45 per unit to put together the mini roundabout or whatever you want to call it. And I'm just wondering, when you're giving us a kind of a price estimate of $8,000, like how else can we approach this that might kind of think even more out of the box? That, like, do we have neighboring communities that would be willing to lend you something for temporary installation, or could those sorts of things be shared across our region? I don't know if you have those relationships, but it would seem like not everybody's going to have all these things in use all the time. So, or if there's just other ways you could think about getting a larger cache of equipment as we continue down the road of trying to engage entire neighborhoods, because Old West Lawrence is actually kind of small compared to some of the neighborhoods in this town. And if we're already hitting a limit on how much we have, and if we don't have enough on hand, I think we got to start to think ahead. If you cross the street, go to Pinckney, that's a much larger neighborhood, and it sounds like we wouldn't have near enough equipment. So I don't know how to get there. I just figure this is teaching us that we probably didn't buy enough. We certainly didn't anticipate how much time it would take. It's probably not a 12-month process. That's what I'm kind of figuring out. But these are the kind of creative ideas I think that we're hoping to see more of, and getting the whole neighborhood involved is also what we're kind of hoping for. So I appreciate you guys hanging in there, because it is a long process, and no one wants to see it be a 10-year process like university. I don't know if it was 10. It was, yeah. I'm just thinking, these things can take a long, long time. But hopefully the energy you have doesn't just end there. It continues and gets us past the hurdle around funding, if that's really the biggest next barrier. But getting that plan, one that meets all the requirements, I think is hopefully still what we can strive for.
Anyone else? Okay, well, I think there's no action to take. We're just receiving the project today, so we'll look forward to getting additional information and update next month, and hopefully the plan in another month or two. So, okay, great. Thank you, Dustin. Thanks for the public comment, too.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to receiving the 6th Street shared use path and intersection improvements. The project office check plans and provide feedback.
Okay.
Okay, good evening, Chair and Commissioners. I'm Anthony Schuler. I'm a project engineer with Municipal Services and Operations. I'm here to introduce the office check plans for the 6th and Swartz Road ADA improvements. This project's going to consist of two parts, a 10-foot shared use path along the north side of 6th Street from Lawrence Avenue to Garber Automotive, east of Rockledge Road, tying into the existing shared use path that's already there, and reconstruction of the intersection at 6th Street and Swartz Road. The timeline for this project, we currently have the office check plans. After we've gone through those, we plan to make the revisions, put it out for bid. We're hoping to begin construction in spring of 2023. So if we look briefly at the map right here of the project location, the top of the screen is north. We can see right here going from Lawrence Avenue, moving east just past Rockledge, and the intersection reconstruction right here on the intersection of Swartz. I'll be going briefly through the plan sheets to kind of take a look at the project more in depth. So we're going to be beginning right here on the intersection of Lawrence Avenue and 6th Street with the construction of this ADA ramp and begin replacing this 4-foot sidewalk with a 10-foot shared use path. Moving east. We'll come here, it's going to move through the entrance of the Dillon's parking lot, have the west entrance. Next plan sheet, we continue along. We're going across the east entrance of the Dillon's parking lot. Continue right here along with the shared use path. We have our intersection right here at 6th and Swartz. We'll be looking at that a little bit more for the reconstruction plan sheet. But for now, we're just showing it continuing along the north side of 6th Street. And again, continuing along from the intersection at Swartz. Moving here, we have a reconstruction of the apron to make sure it's ADA compliant as it continues along our shared use path as we go across Tuckaway apartment complex. Continuing along, another approach being rebuilt as we continue our shared use path. Continuing along still, Crestline Drive, leading into an apartment complex here. On the west side, here's the east entrance to the apartment complex. Again, rebuilding approaches as necessary. Continuing along, we have our ADA access ramps, our crossing going across Rockledge Road. And continuing to the east, continuing, we'll come to the end of the shared use path, as you can see along here at Garber Automotive, and we will be tying into an existing shared use path that exists over here on the east end, and that'll conclude the limits of construction going east to west. And on this final plan sheet, we have the intersection being reconstructed here at 6th and Swartz, putting in the new ramps and crossings and everything to make it ADA compliant. So that's a synopsis of what we're doing in the office check plans we're looking at. Do you have any questions?
I have a few, so sorry. This is my neighborhood, so I'm pretty familiar with it. I'm kind of related to our study session, I guess, in terms of the markings and pedestrian amenities across the major driveways. For instance, Dillon's is one where it's, you know, very wide entrance at two places, and whether those will be marked as with cross markings in those areas where there's higher volume.
That's not currently on the plans. It's very rare to put any pedestrian amenities across approaches into businesses.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult to use those intersections, especially at certain times of the day, because as you're walking west, the cars are coming up at a very quick speed, and then cars are turning in in the other direction. It's pretty difficult to get through those intersections. There's a lot of traffic. There's also a transit stop right there in between the two entrances to Dillon's, and so you have a lot of traffic of people getting to the bus stop. So, I guess we'll wait to see what the report is from Trekk, in terms of what could be done in terms of safety at those intersections. But it's as a frequent user of those kinds of, and it's not unusual for many other parts of the city, but it's just something that we observe on a pretty regular basis of, how difficult it is to cross that, and because cars are not necessarily watching for pedestrians. I noticed chiseled square cut curb. What does that look like?
That's just a cutout in the curb that the surveyors put to shoot elevations.
Oh, okay.
So that won't be anything significant or really
Okay.
noticeable.
I saw that mentioned several times, but I wasn't familiar with that as a design element, so
Yeah, that's
that's not.
very minor.
Yeah, okay. And at the corner of 6th and Lawrence, it said replace concrete curb and gutter with mill and overlay. I was trying to picture what that is. Is that asphalt or mill and
We're
overlay?
replacing the concrete curb and gutter with concrete curb and gutter. This shaded area, if you can see down here on the plans, is where there's going to be a 2-foot mill and overlay there, because when you replace the curb like that, you're likely to damage the asphalt. So you need to mill out in front of it and relay it.
So in front of it, okay.
That way there's not a gap or anything there that makes the crossing
Yeah,
a tripping hazard or anything.
okay, great, yeah. I couldn't quite see where it was pointing to, and I didn't, all the rest of it was concrete. It was concrete, and I didn't think that you were replacing that with the
Yeah,
mill
that's
and
just
overlay.
for
That's
on the
the
crossing
street
on the
itself.
street, yes.
Yeah, okay. And in general, at the intersection, at the signalized intersections along the way, in a couple of places I could see where the signal pedestals were placed, but there are several places like, at 6th and Swartz where it's very difficult. Where it is now, it's on a pole on the northwest corner, and it's difficult. If someone's, a cyclist is coming up on the street, or to have to get over to trip the signal. You have to get off your bike, and then if you don't make it in time and it turns green, by the time you get back on your bike again, it's a short signal if the pedestrian button hasn't been pushed, and so you miss the light. So I just wondered whether you're going to do like you've done on other intersections like that, where you have a pedestal that's more accessible to reach either from the sidewalk or the shared use path.
I mean, we can make a note of that, but all the ones that are currently planned to be installed are going to be ADA compliant, so they're meeting
Okay.
all those regulations, so.
Okay.
Yeah, when in instances where we've had to move the curb ramp or realign it, and we've had an existing button, it wasn't ADA compliant. Sometimes it's you need to have a level landing area next to it,
Right.
4x4, I believe, and it needs to be within a certain proximity of the ramp. 18
Okay.
feet, and I may be off by a couple of feet, and so we've done that a lot where we've seen the pedestrian poles, but these here are within that distance that it would be best to keep it on the pole, not have a separate pole that we have to maintain and run conduit to.
Yeah, because it's
so.
kind of like at 6th and Crestline, what you did there on the northeast corner. It was on a pole over kind of a, you had to go around the corner and kind of to get to the button, and now there's a pedestal there that you're able to, get from the path, but, yeah. So just a general comment about thinking about placement of those, of the buttons to push that, is possible to reach, so. Okay, I think that's mainly, well, I guess another one is just about how will pedestrian and bike access be maintained during construction? How will, because a lot of people on bicycles are using that sidewalk on the north side, once you get through Sixth and Iowa, and there's no alternate path, I guess, to get, to keep going west. And so people are on the sidewalk rather than on Sixth Street itself. And so I didn't know, is that section just going to be closed? Will there be another?
It'll have to be closed during construction, but we'll have a sidewalk detour up showing people where to go to
Okay,
make the same route.
yeah. Okay.
I got a kind of a question around the entrances to the businesses.
Yes.
You mentioned that you don't typically put any treatment there on that entrance for the crossing, the people that might be crossing that entrance. Is it possible to keep the crossing elevation the same so that it's essentially serves as a way to heighten the visibility of the pedestrians, or will they be expected to kind of walk down into the street level or the entrance level?
I'm not entirely certain.
Was there a crossing in particular?
Well, you were mentioning Dillon's.
The Dillon's. And
just wondering, would it help at all to have the pedestrian path kind of stay level as it crosses those entrances?
That's a good catch. So what these plans don't show is pavement being replaced through those Dillon's parking lot entrances, and I don't think our designers really shown us that that's an ADA compliant pathway. So I envision that being a change that you see on the final plans, is that pavement being reconstructed to be at a cross slope that's compliant.
Well, I was thinking more just maintaining the level of the sidewalk. So instead of it sloping down,
right,
just keeping it straight, and cars can drive over that, I think. And this stormwater shouldn't, for the city, it would be in the street still. The parking lot is Dillon's problem.
Right. Essentially, the existing curb line is going to stay at the same elevation. You'd see some minor tweaks to get the cross slopes we need for the ADA ramps, but otherwise it would be staying at the same location.
I think I understand what you're talking about. I think it's going to come up a little bit. I was thinking about 22nd and Hy-Vee, that entrance. If you look at that, if you go through there, it got raised up a little. Then there's like kind of a, well, I call it PI, but a point, you get to the edge of the walk and it goes straight to the driveway. So I think it'll be more prominent.
Yeah, that's a good example, I think.
You have a crossing versus now it's just, you have the driveway and the sidewalks crossing the the slope of the driveway versus the sidewalk slope will control the driveway.
Right. I know we're always concerned about raised crossings causing some stormwater issues, but I would imagine that might not be the same issue for an entrance to a business. But I don't know. I would say if we can ever have a crossing that's raised to the level of the sidewalk, that's probably always better for pedestrians. But I don't know all the rules about how to do that right. So leave it to you guys. But if those options, like if our standard thinking is, oh yeah, there's a crossing, we got to cut the sidewalk so people step down into the crossing or into the driveway, that seems not as safe. Like even our residential streets, most of our driveways come up to the level of the sidewalk, I think. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think that definitely would provide some additional visibility and plus a natural speed hump for cars to slow them down.
I really appreciate the improvement on the Lawrence Avenue section, because that's just really tough if you're on a bike trying to make it through there. You definitely have to slow down and navigate around the way it's currently configured.
Right.
And the shared use path is obviously a huge upgrade for people that are riding bikes. I appreciate that.
Great. Any other questions? The funding, we have something on the agenda under staff items. Is that the Cost-Share program, is that the funding that's proposed for funding this project, or is that something different?
That is correct. Yep, we'll be touching on that later.
Okay.
So you had mentioned about the transit stop on that north side. Is there, have you consulted with transit around the need to create a pullout for them to make it easier for people to get on and off, or even to keep the motor vehicle traffic flowing when the transit bus, is pulled over there?
Specifically, no. Generally, they have been in part of the review process and the plans. That's something we can follow up with them on to see if that's something we would be interested in accomplishing with the project.
A lot of instances, they prefer to be in the travel lane so they can keep
in the travel lane.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
so that's the.
Well, currently at that spot, I think they're in the turn lane,
For Dillon's, yeah.
Yeah, and in front of Dillon's.
West of Schwartz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really closer to a little bit further west than Schwartz, but on that side of the street. Now on the south side, it is closer to Schwartz, to the corner there. But I think at that point, the bus pulls into the turn lane.
Would it be better to move that closer to the entrance there? I mean, instead of being in the turn lane, closer to the intersection? I don't know.
We'll confirm with Adam.
It might also.
It's kind of mid-block at this point between Lawrence and Schwartz. It's kind of right in between, right in front of Dillon's, but then going across the parking lot and stuff. But yeah, it'd be good to talk to Transit about what they. This would be a good time to discuss that. Okay. So the next steps then we'll see, so these are the office plans, then the next step will be field check, or is that?
Yep. Next step will be final plans after we get the revisions done to the office check.
Okay.
Yeah, we wouldn't plan on bringing them back.
What's the timeline for the project?
Timeline is for construction in 2023.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Do you want to see if there's any public comment?
Oh, yeah, we do.
I don't know if there is.
Is there public comment, Christina?
Do we notify the public about these sorts of projects? Is there any practice of doing that?
On this project, we haven't sent out letters to property owners, with the exception we've been coordinating with the owner of the gas station there on the corner of Schwartz. This project evolved. It started off as an intersection improvement project doing signals and ramps at that intersection. We saw an opportunity to put this shared use path project in there. But no, we haven't with this one sent letters out like we normally would. So the next project that we're going to preview on Kentucky, and that project, residences and homeowners everywhere, and we sent letters out to them, and we'll follow up again before construction.
But will property owners along this path get notice, or?
Yes.
Yeah, for this project. I'm sorry, did you?
We do have somebody that has.
Okay, very good. Go ahead with public comment.
Can you,
Hi, this is Jake Preble. I had a couple comments to make on this item that I'd like to bring to the Commission's attention. First is at the very east end of the project, next to Iowa Street, where there's the existing shared use path. There's not currently a crossing, like the bump mat for blind people, basically to see where the edge of the curve is. And so it seems kind of silly to me that like we build the project right up to where we left off and not finish that end off. And then the other thing is I appreciate all of Charlie Bryan's comments regarding the raised crossings. There are several business entrances and residential entrances along this street. And one of the biggest dangers for pedestrians and cyclists is cars turning in and out quickly without looking. So anything to help draw attention to the crosswalk is a good thing in my mind. And other than that, and I'm really looking forward to this project. This is an area that really needs it. The amount of bikes I see in this area on the sidewalk already. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any possibility of adding in I know it wasn't in the project scope, but is there side?
It's a commercial entrance. We don't put detectable warnings on commercial entrances typically.
that's correct. I took note that they're kind of shown that way on the plans, but to have warning panels. But typically, our standard is not to include those. Those are for public intersections.
Okay.
We've not included them. There are instances where they've been put in before on site plans down, but our standard is not to include those on commercial driveways or residential driveways.
Okay, so we do see those all over the place, though. I mean, those shouldn't be there in any of these illustrations?
They should not.
Okay.
On commercial or residential driveways.
I'm not clear on what
So
the public comment was.
It was simply saying where it ends, the other side doesn't have the raised bulb kind
The
of.
domes, truncated
detectable
domes.
warning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was saying, if you're going to put it on this side, you should do both. And I think what Dave's saying is it won't be put on the other side either. So it's just not a standard.
So that meets ADA because the shared use path is continuous.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm surprised that meets ADA standards to not be on both sides when
So it makes sense to me on residential streets because sidewalks are continuous and they don't, I mean, they're still level as they cross driveways. But in a lot of businesses, you kind of have to, if you're walking, you go down into the driveway, and it feels like it makes more sense to actually have those. Unless you treat them the same and you create a level crossing. But if the elevation of the sidewalk changes, it feels like it's, I don't know. Why would those not be in those? Why is that the policy the city has?
Well, my understanding is that it's just to give the indication that pedestrians at an intersection and not a street intersection and not commercial driveway or residential driveway, where usually the sidewalk continues through the driveway. We'll have a conversation with our AD coordinator and just double check that. But that's the way that we've approached it, and that's the way from our previous traffic engineer that explained it to me, and that's what we've done. So, but
because you could get away from that needing the detectable warnings if you did like Charlie said, and what we talked about in front of Dylan's is just maintain that level through the sidewalk. So then it slows traffic down going into the
I mean, I'd like that
driveways, 'cause I
across
just
the
about got
board.
hit
To
at
me,
that
that would be the best
intersection.
way to do it.
Yeah, because I just about got hit at that intersection the other day, on the sidewalk on 6th Street, and someone was coming out of that business and, fast, and he was looking, because he wanted to get out into traffic, and it was, really busy, and I was watching, and I, stopped, but if I, it was a close call. So it would serve a lot of purpose if you could maintain that level.
That'd be my preference, maintain that level. But if we are going to see it kind of transition at those driveways, it does seem like, I guess I'd want to know more about why we would have a policy that doesn't use something. SBB Engineering looks like they did this work, so are we thinking that they don't know better, or is it just our own local policy that says we don't use those? And I'm assuming whoever did the work probably put it in there because that's standard practice somewhere, or in most places. Maybe it should be here too. But my preference would be that
Yeah.
the sidewalks are kind of the priority. and
We'll look
keeping
into
it
that and I'll add it
as
to
is.
the list of the crossing standards.
Oh, yeah, that would be really great to know.
Yeah,
So that we
that
have
would
it
be
in-
great, yeah.
But it's not a policy, it's just not on our standard detail, and that's that's just the way that we've done it. But I have seen it in other places at driveways, and so it's what would constitute wanting to put it there versus not, and then we will review the ADA requirements as well. So
Yeah, this would be a great time to do it, when it's being completely rebuilt rather than having to go back.
I guess I would like to know, like, there's no reason not to do it, then why wouldn't we always keep the sidewalk level?
Well, I think one thing you'd want to consider is the grade of the existing road versus where the sidewalk's at. And if you're holding that grade, you get that apron can get at a really steep percent, and then your vehicles can't make it in. Fire's going to have difficulty with it. So that's just something you'd have to balance between how much you can move that versus where the existing road's at.
That makes sense.
yeah.
Right. Any other comments, questions? All right. Well, thanks for the opportunity to review these plans. It's an exciting project. All right, we'll move on to the next item, which is to receive the 2022 Pedestrian Improvements Project Field Check Plans and provide feedback.
Okay, I'll be presenting these as well. Anthony Schuler, project engineer with MSO. These are the field check plans for the 2022 Pedestrian Improvements Project. This project consists of 3 components: a sidewalk replacement along Kentucky Street, filling sidewalk gaps on Main Street, and the installation of 2 crossings on Louisiana Street and New Hampshire Street, respectively. The timeline for this project is we currently are looking at the field check plans. Next will come office check plans. There will be bid after that. We're also planning on this one being constructed ideally in the spring of 2023. If we take a look at the map right here, once again, the top of the screen will be north, and we can see the different locations that we'll be doing the sidewalk filling on Main, the crosswalks on New Hampshire and Louisiana, and the primary bulk of the project being the sidewalk replacement along Kentucky Street. Take a brief look at the plans once again. We'll be starting right here on the intersection of 19th Street in Kentucky. Now, north is going to be the right side of your screen. So as we continue along north, we'll be going along the west side of the road, constructing a 5-foot wide sidewalk, replacing the approaches in the driveways as necessary. So we continue on the plan sheets, continue with our sidewalk, continue with our approaches, still along the west side of Kentucky going north. Coming here to the intersection of West 18th Street, reconstructing the ramps here and crossings to make those ADA compliant, continuing along both on the east and the west side now of Kentucky, continuing to move north. Continuing likewise, making improvements, replacements where necessary. Continuing still, making on both east and west side, moving north, replacing sidewalk, repairing drives as necessary. Crossing here along West 17th Street. We have our ADA ramps on both the east and the west side. Continuing likewise, going north along Kentucky, still on both sides. Continuing still. Coming here to the intersection of West 16th Street, installing once again ADA ramps on both corners. Continuing to the north, we've stopped construction along the east side and we're continuing along the west side of Kentucky, still going north, still replacing drives as needed to make them ADA accessible. Continuing still to the north along the west side of Kentucky, making replacements and improvements where necessary. Continuing still just along the west side as we pass 15th Street. Coming now to the intersection of 14th Street, again, we're installing new ADA ramps to make this crossing compliant. Continuing still along the west side of Kentucky Street, going north. Continuing still. Coming to the intersection of West 13th Street. Once again, replacing and installing new ADA ramps to make this compliant. Along the west side, continuing on Kentucky Street, going north along the west side. And here we come to the end of the project where we'll be installing the ADA ramps here at the northwest corner, or excuse me, the southwest corner of West 12th and Kentucky Street. And that concludes that portion. Here we have the Main Street portion of the project. Here, once again, north will be to the right side of the screen. So we're looking here on Main Street. Our sidewalk we're installing right along here, 5 foot wide, is going to be on the east side. And once again, like before on Kentucky Street, we're continuing along the east side. We're replacing drives as necessary to make them ADA compliant, installing our 5 foot wide sidewalk as we go. Again, coming up here to the intersection of West 5th Street, installing ADA ramps, replacing drives as necessary. Continuing along still. And we see where it concludes here with the installation of this ADA ramp. Moving along to the next site, we have the intersection of New Hampshire Street and East 11th Street, where we'll be installing a crossing going across 11th Street. And we have new ADA ramps being installed at this intersection. Rectangular rapid flashing beacons installed here. And the final site here along Louisiana Street, and once again, we're north is still the right side of the street. So just to the south of West 29th Terrace, we'll be installing a crossing right along Louisiana Street with sidewalks replaced as necessary to get the ADA ramps compliant. And that concludes the plan sheets for this project. Do you have any questions?
Got a question for the brick. I noticed at least on the Kentucky plans, there were some brick sidewalks. Is it whenever a brick sidewalk is a piece of the current sidewalk, will it be taken out, or if it meets certain standards, will it stay in place?
Currently, we're planning on replacing brick sidewalks where we can to replace them with concrete because they're more ADA compliant and consistent with current code with the city. The residents are going to have the option to keep the brick sidewalks if they wish to do so. So we're going to be sending out letters to them to discuss whether or not they want to assume the financial responsibility of maintaining a brick sidewalk along there or allow us to go back with concrete.
And the conversation on the brick sidewalks really starts with an evaluation if it's a historic property or in the historic environs or in an urban conservation overlay district. We reach out to Lynn Zollner, the Historic Resources Administrator, and get her take on all of these. And you know, we can look at the maps and figure out where we need to put those back. We like to get her confirmation. So there is, I think, 1700 Kentucky is the property that's, I believe in the environs. That one's going to have to go back brick.
That's
There are,
correct.
I think, maybe one or two other properties with brick sidewalk. And specifically, I keep thinking of the one, I think it's on the 1700 block. It's the only brick sidewalk in the middle of 12 properties of concrete. And so it'd be our intention to reconstruct that at concrete. But as Anthony said, we'll reach out to the property owner and kind of get their input on that.
For the Louisiana Street project, you're adding in a rectangular rapid flashing beacon.
Yes.
Can you, like, I'm assuming that's to help improve crossing safety to get to the park? Is that?
Yep.
Fair? What's the current crossing? Is it just
I don't think there is. I don't think there is a crossing there now.
Crossing.
Well, that's great. That'll be a nice addition to that neighborhood. Appreciate that.
And so that's a collector street, I believe. And so I was just looking at the information that was shared in the study session and collector street that was 30 to 35 mile per hour, that would be the treatment that would be used, or just crosswalk markings. So it would be the higher facility type.
And it's just to the north of the driveway that goes in there? Is that?
Of which driveway?
Or, like, where does the crossing, just help me get oriented to, is it right where the church is, or is it like?
It's south of West 29th Terrace and
Yeah,
just
you can
north
see.
of the church entrance.
Okay. So essentially mid-block crossing?
Yes.
Okay. I had a question about the 18th in Kentucky. I don't know if you can bring back the visual for that. It looked like it seemed unusually complex, and I was curious to understand that. Like, it is more winded instead of straight crossing pattern.
Talking about this interesting looking.
Yeah, what's
corner
going on
right here.
there?
Yeah, that's something we discussed with the designer already. It's been in our comments we sent back to them, and they're looking at it. There's some infrastructure and things there that's making it difficult to get a more traditional ADA ramp in there. But we're looking into that to see if we can get something that looks a little more traditional.
Okay. And then that's the east side?
North would be the right side of your screen,
Yeah.
so this would be the west.
Okay, the west. All right, so then crossing then to the east, it doesn't appear that there really is a crossing?
That's another comment that was submitted to the designer, that
Okay.
these crossings aren't particularly leading somewhere. So we need to make sure that that access is available.
Okay. So the goal would be that you can cross all four directions at that intersection?
Ideally.
Okay. That would be great. I think that intersection just kind of jumped out at me.
I can't find the reference now, but it's kind of roughly in that same area of 1700 Kentucky. And I don't know if it's on the right or left or on the south or north side of that, but said reference crushed rock surfacing.
Yes.
And what is that? I mean, I know what that surfacing is, but why is that there, I guess?
That's just, if you look right here on the plans, you see the sidewalk going along here. The crushed rock is this little portion along here in the driveway. And it's just to kind of fill in the driveway so it's flush with the sidewalk that's going to be going through there.
Commissioner, essentially the existing driveway is gravel right now.
Okay.
So we're putting concrete through there and then putting in some rock next to it to tie into what's there already.
Okay, kind of like my question of 6th and Lawrence. It's just filling in around the, yeah. So it'll be, the sidewalk itself is concrete?
Yes.
Then. Okay, great. And a couple of different locations about removing large trees. Is it practice to replace those trees?
We haven't addressed that at this point. We're going to be replacing them, and then down the line, when we get the office check plans, we'll be talking with Parks and seeing what they want to do, what their plan is for putting those back.
Okay.
I have a just broad question. So office check plans, field check plans, can you help us understand, like, it sounds like there's a real method to them.
Sure.
To your profession. So what are these distinctions?
Yeah, so Commissioner, you're probably used to getting field check plans from us, which are probably 50% is what I think Dave would probably say. In the case of the 6th Street project, like I think I may have alluded to, we started off as just an intersection project, and our designer had done a lot of work on it, and then we added in the shared use path. So we're presenting office check plans more 75, 80, 90%, a lot closer to final design. There's more detail, ramp elevations, those sorts of things. So really it's just terminology on how complete the plans are. It's a little bit subjective.
Got it. Thank you.
So office check is more complete than field check?
Yes.
Okay.
I think this might be the first time we've had an office check plan to look at. Right. I really appreciate getting a chance to see these plans. I think that it takes some of that discussion we have around how to best use the funding, and it feels more like, oh, now we're really getting somewhere, So it's nice to see it.
Yep. Other questions on these improvements from commissioners? Is there any public comment, Christina? No one? Okay. Thank you. Well, so this is just, we just provided feedback, so there's no action to be taken other than that. Let's move on to item 3, which is receive information on joint application to the USDOT for Safe Streets and Roads for All grant. Consider providing a letter of support.
Yeah, so we, staff's been working with the MPO and Eudora and Baldwin City to put together a joint application for this new Safe Streets for All grant. That's part of the new infrastructure legislation. There's really 2 different pieces to this program. One is to create a safety action plan. And for some that are familiar with the term Vision Zero, it's kind of along the lines of a Vision Zero plan or creating a Vision Zero statement. In addition to doing some planning effort around reviewing crash data and ways to mitigate crashes. And so there's the planning piece that we are applying for, And if we create a safety action plan, a community safety action plan, we would be eligible for the implementation grant, which is geared to making the build improvements to alleviate safety issues. And so this is a 80-20 federal local match. KDOT's participating 10% for any community that applies. And then with Baldwin City and Eudora, we are eligible for another 5 or 10%. So I think at most we would be up front. The city would need to pay for 5%, but it may be 0. I think we're still trying to determine that. But regardless, I think this is a good opportunity for us, and it aligns with things that we've talked about, safety in the community. And it's really kind of a something that they, we will look at data that we have with the implementation or with the planning grant. So there would be an effort to create that plan and look at crash rate and so there's no specific projects at this point other than going for, if we were to be awarded the funds to go forward with that safety action plan. And so this is one of the grants that really helps to have letters of support. Was on the city commission agenda last night to get a letter of support, and we're getting letters of support from other organizations, and our action tonight's to for this board to give us a letter of support. So we have a draft ready to go, but the application's due on September 15th. And it'll probably be a few months before we hear back. But with that, I'll stand for any questions. And I did attach a fact sheet to the agenda item. As an FYI.
Questions?
Nope.
And the intent, it says multimodal. But there, quite a bit of reference to, it's crash. I just want to make sure that the intent is that it is truly multimodal, that, not just focusing on roadway and, automobile. So that data from bicycle pedestrians will be included in developing that action plan.
Yep.
Yeah, and most likely, and I'm assuming probably some sort of advisory committee in terms of, developing that that safety action plan. Yeah, great. Yeah, so, and you've got a draft letter you mentioned that for support, letter of support. Okay, so if there aren't any other questions, I'd entertain a motion for submitting letter of support for the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant.
I move that we authorize the chair to sign a letter of support for the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant.
Okay. Is there a second?
I second it.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, thank you. And will you get that, David, will you get that to Nick to sign?
I'll work with Nick on that.
Okay, great. All right. So we're ready for staff items.
Yeah, Commissioner, I've got the first one. That's providing an update on the KDOT Cost-Share program application. So KDOT opened up applications last month for this program. It's really a program to offer grant funds for a variety of transportation projects. And staff is going to be submitting an application for the 6th Street Shared Use Path and Intersection project, which we just discussed here a moment ago. It's a project that is in our approved 5-year plan. It was slated for construction next year. So it's we feel like it's an attractive project for KDOT being shovel ready. In addition, we're proposing to only ask for 50% grant. It's a $1.3 million construction project, so we're going to ask for $650,000. Their grant weighs additional local match more favorably, so we feel like we're kind of going all out selling this project. Getting grant funds for this project gives us more flexibility within our 5-year plan. You know, inflation has increased prices on our construction projects, so you know, that additional $650,000 could go a long way to helping the rest of that plan out down the road.
What's the timeline for their, typically when they make decisions for this one? Are you?
That's been more and more uncertain. The application's due next week. Anymore, the governor does an announcement, and that's added a little bit more to the timeline on these grants. I would anticipate it happening probably 2 to 3 months, you know, before the end of the year. I think they're really wanting to get their money spent. So
yeah, okay, yeah. So in time for the project.
Are we going to move forward with the project one way or another, or is that?
Yes, we have the funds allocated for that project in our 5-year plan. We've got additional traffic signal and ADA money for those intersection improvements that were originally their own project. So it will move forward one way or at the other.
Great.
Great.
Sounds like a great opportunity. All right. Any other questions for Jake about this? Okay, let's move on to the 29th and Haskell Lane update.
So you asked for speed and volume data. We're still working on it. I apologize. We don't have it for this meeting. We anticipate having it for the next meeting. So I did want to leave it on there just so we could mention that. And the shared scooter update, I reached out to KU Director of Transportation, Aaron Quisenberry, about their interest in being involved in, you know, a shared scooter pilot. He's been working to get a meeting scheduled with the student body president. That has not occurred yet. So I'm hoping to have maybe some more feedback from him at our next meeting after he meets with them.
Okay, great. All right. Commission items.
I have a few things. I don't know. So I wanted to start with, at the last meeting, I had asked about attendance data for Commissioner Redding. And as I recall, he had not quite violated or met the standard to be considered involuntarily resigned, but his lack of attendance tonight does that. So I'd like to make sure that we're honoring our bylaws and send notification to him that we've considered him to be resigned and open up the seat to someone else that might be interested in serving the community. That would be the first item. Second thing, I had some discussion with Nick about this question or idea that I had around, you know, we have, I think, gotten a good practice now of seeing a 5-year bike ped project prioritization comes to us. You know, we update it every year. We know that the out years could change a lot. And that seemed like there's a nice rhythm to that. I think we've all understood it pretty well. The CIP has a 5-year planning kind of span also. And what occurred to me was when we looked at street maintenance plans, they're just 1 year. And yet we hear often, like you guys know, that a certain road might be scheduled for maintenance a few years away from now, so that helps justify like why a bike ped project might be kind of overlooked for a year or two. And it got me to thinking that maybe it'd be helpful to kind of have a similar 5-year kind of horizon on street maintenance. I didn't know if that was reasonable, but it felt like a really good practice for us to get our heads around these major pieces of work that you do and how do we stay kind of ahead of the process, over that 5-year horizon. We know just from tonight, these projects take a long time, and you guys do a great job of doing that work, and it's hard for the public to understand, that it takes a lot of work to bring something about. You're showing us tonight things that are going to be built next year. We've heard things that are going to happen, a few years out. So just maybe street maintenance be another one of those areas where, yes, it might be fuzzier 5 years out, but maybe there's a way to see it, kind of a preview of where you're thinking things are going to be in the next couple of years. And it helps our brains to kind of wrap around, like, are there other opportunities for, community engagement around what's possible with street maintenance? We saw the thing tonight about in the study session about how a whole looked like a mill and overlay project that turned into really a 4-mile redesign. It felt like a redesign, even though it wasn't probably intended that way, until I guess they must have did something to turn it into something where they got private funds to improve on a whole section of road. So that was just another one of those, you can't pull that off in 4 months without having thought about it ahead of time, probably. Maybe they did literally pull it off in 4 months. But it strikes me as we'd be better off being able to think ahead of the timeline. And so street maintenance is just one of those right now. We only see it sometimes the same year that it's happening.
Yep. So good timing on that comment. We've been working on that throughout the summer, and in November, we intend to bring you the 2023 to 2027 street maintenance plan. So having the 5-year plan, recognizing that it's going to be flexible every year. Sure. That program really, especially with the uncertainty of asphalt prices, and we've had to trim things and add things, but that's been our intent. We've been working on it pretty hard, and so we're. I think it'll be beneficial for this group as we talk about future bike ped facilities. It's beneficial to the public if we can get it online. Just so if someone says, "Well, when's the last time my street was worked on, or when will it be worked on next?" They can, refer to that map, and so we're working on that part as well. In the past, it's around this fall we brought the next year's plan, and so we want to focus on next year and have a discussion on the bike improvements that we've typically done, but we should be able to see the 5-year plan.
Okay, well, that would be wonderful. The other item, I was curious to just maybe we could get some feedback on the SLT project, specifically around the Clinton Parkway interchange. And I've been trying to find that information on the state's project website. I know when they came and talked to us the last time, we had a lot of feedback around how people that were walking or biking were going to get across, get through all the interchange that they had last drafted. And it felt to me like there was a lot of reason they should come back with a new plan with maybe more safety for people that are walking or biking. And I didn't know, is that something is that a reasonable expectation, or could we even see, where they're at with that interchange? We had a lot of discussion about Wakarusa, but Clinton Parkway seems to be kind of off people's radar right now. So,
yeah, I can find that and provide that to you guys. The last drawing. I don't know what's changed in the last year or so. KDOT is going to provide an update on the project to the City Commission next Tuesday.
Oh, okay. So maybe we'll see something there.
Really, kind of focused on, the project's now been funded for construction by KDOT to move forward. That was announced a couple weeks ago. So they're going to talk about schedule, the redesign of the Wakarusa interchange. Originally, if you recall, we had some discussion on it with the neighborhood to the north. So they've made some changes there, and then looking at noise walls.
Okay.
So
Well, and I think the project
key thing.
website does have a more recent version of the Wakarusa, 27th Street, you know, that area. So that feels like they've been pretty responsive and made changes, but it's the other elements that we saw a year ago that I'm just curious if anything's different.
Yeah.
Well, because according, some stuff that I saw this week that, and I don't know if it's true or not, but talking about at-grade crossing across, the big roundabout so that there's which includes exit ramp and entrance ramp and that kind of thing. And so, it doesn't make sense that they're rebuilding Wakarusa, to get rid of the at-grade, but are proposing a at-grade at Clinton Parkway, if they in fact are. That's the thing I don't know, because I've looked too, and I can't tell from what I've seen there whether it is or not, but it looks.
We can circle back and bring back what the design is for that. That's a complicated intersection with the curve being readjusted and where the Lawrence Loop is at, and there's 3 different roundabouts out there, and they heard the feedback at the last meeting, I know that, and we've still having conversations with them about the Iowa crossing.
Yeah.
With the Iowa crossing.
Yeah, I wasn't going to bring that one up.
No, we're looking
Okay.
to see if there's any funding available to do something.
Wonderful.
The comments that Michael Allman shared in the public comment period around the Naismith Drive thing, I guess I'm not familiar enough with what's going on. Is that something that we're going to be hearing more about, or was timeline, was that like a couple years from now, or is that a next year kind of project?
Yeah, we have a project in the CIP to reconstruct Naismith between 19th and 23rd. It was showing the path
So that's going north.
South of 23rd.
So is that?
And so that's not it within the project limits of CIP project.
Okay.
But like other road projects, those plans will come.
Sure.
To the
I
MMTC.
guess I was confused by the section he was showing us. I mean, it makes sense, but I wasn't clear that was in the works or scheduled to be in the works. So it's not. Okay.
No, we are. We have that Naismith shared use path project, which we're going forward with here soon. We have a schedule on that.
It's advertised right now.
Yeah. So it completes the shared use path, most of it on the east side, north of 23rd Street.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
Nothing south.
Yep.
No, nothing south.
Okay. Well, and I think we probably all agree it'd be better to not cross, to just have to cross again. But if that south section of Naismith isn't something that's going to be worked on for a while, sounds like we just got to wait it out. So, is there any physical reason why the shared use path couldn't have been put on the east side as Naismith, south of 23rd? Or was it just development was happening on the other side, so we...
I believe so.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
That's my recollection, is that...
Proxy was going to do it, and we said, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I
wouldn't have
seems like
said-
it makes sense to have it on the east side because that's where the path is coming from the south, and then if it goes,
I mean, one day we'll have it on both sides, so that'd be good.
yeah.
Yep.
Last thing I had, I just was curious about some of the projects, when they go through all of our process here, and then they're done, and we don't have any next steps, like it never comes back to us, and I'm kind of curious about how do we feel about having a little more awareness of, oh, this is done, and there's a ribbon cutting, come out and help us celebrate this completion. I don't know. I mean, do you guys do ribbon cuttings and we just don't know about it, or?
Parks and Rec does ribbon cuttings.
Well, so do they just, I'm thinking about the Lawrence Loop, as significant sections are completed, it's a nice thing for us to all celebrate, and maybe we're just not included in those invitations if Parks and Rec doesn't think of us, I don't know. But it'd be nice to have a chance to kind of see the work that's happened. And I've driven around and I see things that you've shown us, Jake, and it's like, hey, it's here. And it's nice, to see it. And I feel like it'd be nice to also, just celebrate that, not just from our side, but from your side, to know that people appreciated all the work you put into getting the shared use path built around Holcomb Park and, going around Delaware. I remember how we thought about how that might look, and now I've seen it, and it's like, this looks pretty good. And now the trail that goes across McDonald or under McDonald's, like, these are really great things, and we ought to figure out how we can see all that, kind of see it to the end, I guess.
Sure. And I think that's a great idea. I think we would just maybe get your feedback on what projects you'd like to do something like that for. Obviously, like a loop project like that, especially with our tunnel, underneath the KTA would be and that's about wrapping up. So it'd be a good pilot, project to do this on. Maybe we don't do that for, a main sidewalk gap or a crossing, but maybe we do.
Personally, I wouldn't mind, when you see a big project that's finished and it seems you're feeling a touch of pride over it, maybe that's something that we would feel proud about. And to let the public know that we're, this is important work that, we care enough to see it through. And I don't know, maybe no one else cares about these things.
Well, I think another benefit too is you get to see a project completed, you get to walk it, you get to provide us feedback that you might not normally think of, which would be good for us to make better projects.
That's a good point. Anyway, I thought it'd be a nice way. Steve Evans isn't on this commission anymore, but he was always one for doing field trips. And so it's kind of a little bit of, well, what about just seeing it after it's happened? It'd make me feel good, and I assume that it would also help all of us understand, what the difference that's being made by the work that you all are doing. So,
and seeing it from field check, office check to the physical existence of it, I think it really helps visualize what, when you're looking at those, how it translates into an actual project. And you might incidentally, if you use it or you incidentally drive by it, but to celebrate it, I think would be a great idea.
At the very least, if a project is completed and it's just on the staff items, just to give us hey, it's done. If you want to go check it out. Like the shared use path at Holcomb Park. Not Holcomb, I'm sorry, Hobbs Park. I knew it was happening, but I can't keep track of the timeline. You guys, this is your regular job. So just telling us, hey, it's done would be nice. I don't know, did that just finish or was it been done for a while and I just hadn't noticed?
That one's been done for a while.
Yeah, see? So you get
Did one for the spray? Is he talking about the spray park?
No, he's talking about the trail behind Hobbs Park.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And 29th Street. That was one construction project that wrapped up earlier this year.
Yeah, I had coffee a decade the other day, and it was there, and I said, oh, finally, I get to see it. So, sometimes it's just pointing us into hey, this is done, guys. You want to go take a look at it. Maybe not everything, but use your judgment, like what you think
bigger things
would help us to continue to learn about the work that you're doing. So, 23rd Street.
Well, we'll schedule a big thing.
This is the part. For those of you that are newer, it's like it's amazing how the time horizon that this work requires, and there's a whole process of creating a plan for 23rd Street east of that bridge, and it's just like slowly happens, and now we're in the muck of the worst part, where no one enjoys it. But when it's done, then you got to look at it and say, how close is it to the plan that was put together? And that was one that we did, I think, a really great job of engaging the community. That that area around creating the vision for that section of 23rd Street. So just, reflecting on that long process, helping put the context around it so you can think about, how else can we do the work that gets the community engaged appropriately, leads to a good outcome for everybody. So I'd give you a pat on the back for that one when it's done. So that would be one I'd like to be invited to if there is any kind of thing.
Surely there will be.
What's the timeline on that one?
End of next year.
End of next year, okay.
We got some time.
Yeah.
You know it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it's great to see
Good points.
the work happening and
Celebrate some of our projects a little more than we do.
yeah,
this
you
year.
deserve it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I call them signature projects, like really unique projects that we do,
Yeah.
like tunnels and
Yeah.
those are good things that we should celebrate.
Yeah, and get some, recognition in the community too, if it gets covered in the paper or whatever, but
Yeah, we'll see if that happens.
yeah. All right.
Maybe the tunnel.
Yeah, the tunnel,
that's
I think will, yeah.
Kind of cool.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, you mentioned a couple of the things that I had, but I just wanted to mention that there's an upcoming meeting of the Transportation 2050 Steering Committee on the 22nd. And they'll bring back all of the public input and, kind of move to the next step of the plan. I don't know if there's, part of a draft plan put together. I think that will be, part of the discussion. So that's coming up. And like David said, the KDOT presentation to next Tuesday on the Clinton Park, it's really on SLT, but, if you want to make a comment on the Clinton Parkway interchange, that would be a time to do that. And there are a couple of webinars coming up. I don't know if anybody's interested in. They're free webinars. One of them is evaluating pedestrian and bicyclist safety improvements. That's tomorrow at 1:30. And if anyone's interested, I can provide you the link. And then the next one is September 22nd. Dangerous by Design, transportation officials discuss what's wrong with arterials. So anyway, that's a separate group that's putting that on. So anyway, that's all the calendar items I had.
Okay. Well, I've also attached our calendar for, that includes items for next month's meeting. So for October the 3rd, for the study session, we're intending to do the unmistakable identity brainstorm. So I attended their group meeting a couple weeks ago and asked them, for those that are involved in that, to attend the meeting on the 3rd. And that was something that was in our work plan, so we're trying to follow through on that here before the end of the year. And then we had put on the Lawrence Loop downtown section, working on plans for, we're going to be working on plans, right, soon for that Santa Fe Depot to Constant Park. So I'll give you an update on that. And the depot, that's the depot to 8th Street is the one that we're doing next. But the depot to Constant Park is the project that it's kind of funded in the CIP, which was approved last night to move forward with design. And so I just wanted to maybe provide an update on that. And there was, the city had a CIP project. It's been in there for a few years, and then the Riverfront and Center group had inputted essentially the same project. Phase A was the Lawrence Loop section. And so those projects and the dollars were merged into one in the CIP. And so just probably start discussing the plan for moving forward with that design next year. So I wanted to keep momentum moving on that. So those are the Lawrence Loop items. And then we had intended to bring back the crossing policy draft. And so that's the plan so far for October. We will provide an update on Old West Lawrence, probably under staff items, but we'll provide an update on where we're at after we meet with the neighborhood on that project. And then on November, talked about the street maintenance program, 5-year plan. So that's scheduled for November, in addition to kind of having an overview of the projects in the 2023 CIP, so we can start discussing those ahead of time, and a placeholder for the Old West Lawrence pilot project, if we're to the point of having a recommendation. If not, it may be pushed, but that's what we got on the calendar so far. So if there's any questions, let me know.
Great.
For the study session, is it possible to have maybe Adam join us also from Transit? There was a comment that Commissioner Finkeldye had at one of the recent city commission meetings about the way that bus stops were designed in a community he visited recently. And it just was one of those, like, he noted how unique it was that how they designed them, and they included art, and it felt very Lawrence-like. And I think that would be interesting to get his perspective on how transit can support creating a real unmistakable identity about Lawrence, especially if transit is going to be, if the pilot for next year to have fare-free transit, if that works out, that becomes how Lawrence is known, as a place you can come, get around town, on an all-electric bus fleet. It seems like that's the direction we're headed. I mean, those are starting to make Lawrence stand out for a transportation asset. And that's probably not how the unmistakable Lawrence brand ever, came about, thinking about transportation. But that kind of creativity, I think, could be really something we can contribute. And transit's, we put a lot of money into transit, so maybe there's a way to think differently about it. So, and then I'm not sure if Parks and Rec is going to be involved in this discussion, but the signage that you talked about, the wayfinding, that feels like another one of those that starts to create our identity. People see signs, how to get around town, whether it's on foot, on bike, whatever, but maybe those are connected already. You've already got that all figured out, but
I don't know if we've figured it out as far as the study session. Derek Rogers is the champion of that group, so
maybe he's already made that connection. But I see it as
but yeah, it's kind of vague. I mean, it's transportation related, so it could include transit, signing. Yeah, what? I mean, I think the Lawrence Loop's an easy one that we talk about. It's going to, when it's done. But I guess what else is there? And so there's folks part of that commitment team that are not just city staff. There's external folks that are included in that group that may have some ideas. We'll include Adam, invite him as well from Transit. And
thank you. Do we have any for the next November, December? We don't have any study sessions identified, or?
Well, it's I had put in parentheses community engagement under the future study sessions topic. I hadn't plugged it in yet. We have a new community engagement manager in the city, in the not in our department, but for the city. It's working with Porter now, and then we have a new community engagement public information officer in our department who just started. And so it might be a good time to have one or both of them attend, get their thoughts, feedback. So I talked with Nick a little bit about it, and just for now, put that as November, but unless something else comes up.
That sounds like a great topic.
It
It sounds like it was about that time last year that we were scheming up the Your Turn, where we asked, organizations to come and present to us. So I don't know if we're going to do anything like that this year.
Because did we end up doing it?
I thought we had an aspiration to try to do it again this year.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Wasn't it the end of the year we did that?
Yeah, well.
Or was it the beginning of, was it January?
It was January.
Okay.
I think the first one that I came to was in January.
That was the Your Turn version?
Okay. But that was 2 years ago, and.
Oh, was it 2 years ago?
Oh, well, no, it was 2021. Yeah, so just last year. So. All right. Any other comments, items for discussion? If not, I'll call for a motion to adjourn.
Oh.
We don't have public comment for staff items or calendar, so, yeah, so we won't be able to take that.
What about commission items?
It's the same, Michael.
Yeah, commission items also.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
I second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.